G'day, mate. 40 here. Quite a mugshot by Donald Trump after his latest indictment, this one in Georgia. And it reminds me of some things that I learned in acting class. So when I was taking an acting class on audition technique, the teacher emphasized the power of just allowing your chin to drop a little bit and then your eyes pop open. So Donald Trump here, he's prepared for this mugshot. Notice how the chin is down and then the eyes pop open. So the eyes are the windows to the soul. People read, all sorts of meaning into your eyes, into your expressions, because we cannot think a thought without a particular alignment of our body. Right? When we think about politics, or we think about the monetary supply, or we think about love, right? Our muscles all over the body start arranging themselves in a particular way, so that once you get to know people well, or once you're particularly attuned to this, you can read what's going on in someone's head just by the way their muscles start aligning, including with the face. So Donald Trump is sending the message that he's going to fight this indictment, all right? And when he's thinking, I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight to vindicate myself, all right, that's going to come through in his countenance through the particular alignment of his musculature, all right? Without this particular alignment of his musculature, including muscles in his face, right, he could not be thinking about fighting. Right? You can't have a thought and you can't have an emotion without a particular alignment of your body. Right? Certain emotions, certain thoughts force different alignments of your body. And you can't think, right? You can't have a concrete thought without some increased level of tension. All right? Your body is going to gear up. You're going to do some work when you're thinking, as opposed to just being in a place of observation. So right now, I'm just going to move into a place of just pure observation. I'm not imposing any judgments on the world, and my face will free up. There will be less tension in my face, that when I come back to trying to make my point, where I'm thinking a series of thoughts, and then my musculature, including on my face and in my back and in my shoulders down to my ankles, will have to realign in a certain way to enable the development of thoughts or the expression of emotions. You can't feel depression or excitement or joy or laughter without a particular alignment of your body. It'll be very hard for me, for example, to feel depressed when I've got this kind of upward direction flowing through my body. To feel depressed, you have to depress your body. You have to pull in, you have to tighten, you have to compress your muscular alignment to really get into that feeling of depression, rage, resentment. All right, when I'm up here like this, right, it's virtually impossible for me to feel rage and resentment. But Trump is pulled down into rage, resentment. I'm going to fight this. So the thoughts, right, require a certain alignment of the body. The emotions require a certain alignment of the body. And then when you get into similar or the same alignments of the body, even without explicitly thinking the thoughts or having the emotions, those thoughts and feelings will naturally start to align with how you carry yourself. So everything that's going on with your thinking, all right, is going to affect your emotions and your body alignment. Everything going on with your bodily alignment, all right, how tight, tense, compressed your muscles are, right? That's going to affect your thinking and your emotions will affect your thinking and your bodily alignment. So we are a unity. We are one, guys. We are all one. And everything that's going on with one part of us is going to ripple through all parts of us, from our muscular alignment to our thinking to our feeling. Will Trump remain stoic when his cellmate has his way with him? I think Trump will be a fighter. I don't think he'll be passive when his cellmate goes after him. And so when you go for the king, right? When you come for the king, this is a line from the TV show The Wire, right? You better not miss. And that kind of reminds me what happened with Prigozhin, right? Who met his demise this week as Vladimir Putin reasserts control. This is Robert Wright talking with a Russia expert, Nikita Petrov, who's basically a liberal.
Remember, I was paying a lot of attention to it early on, like months before the big, the mutiny. He was starting to do these videos where he was getting a little uppity, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems like you're creating more trouble than the president of your country wants you to create, right? And then it got, as the mutiny approached, it got more and more extreme. And then he started saying things like, wait, was that a reference to Putin? When he says, I forget that there's a term, grandpa or something. And he clarifies and says, no, that was either Shoigu or Gerasimov. Shoigu, the Ministry of Defense, Gerasimov, the head of the military campaign. But it was getting so weird. And I started saying, is he mentally unstable? And then I just thought, well, he's obviously extremely not risk averse. I mean, remember, he was a street criminal. He did like many years in prison. I mean,
Correct.
criminals are famously not risk averse,
Correct.
and he actually
goes to these war zones in which his people are fighting, where he used to go. Yeah.
Right. So what's your theory of Prigozhin? Like, kind of what exactly? It's also a fact. I mean, there was friction, to say the least, between him and the military command, which we could get into. But what's your, which might give him more in the way of a plausible motivation for this than we really understand. But what is your theory of Prigozhin and how he kind of unwound and the mutiny happened?
Yeah. So again, you have to preface this with saying, I'm not sure of anything. And then, like, at the time before the mutiny, when he started to make these political statements and started within Russia, he traveled, he did a little tour and talked to people and posted these videos where he sounded like, the oppositional politician. He was, and the charismatic one, truth teller, and he's just from the war. There was a lot of appeal there. And at that time, I think most, like, this, like, taking it at face value versus a conspiratorial version of some kind, the conspiracy version was higher than it is now, obviously. Like, people thought this is Putin's friend giving him a favor, like he's going to be the next puppet opposition, like the people who are tired of this war, people who are upset with the government for not being effective in this war. He hit a lot of these critiques for different kinds of groups. Like, if you were anti-war to begin with, he had a line for that. This war shouldn't have started.
Right.
But then, since we already started and we're in this mess, we have to do it properly. So this is for the kind of Russians with attitudes type people, that more effort should be put into the war. So he had different kinds of appeal for different groups of people. And the thinking then among many was, again, it was like nobody was really, really sure, but it was a common thought that this is, he's going to be like the sparring partner for Putin. So people who are upset will be able to have this guy as their icon, but he's totally controlled by Putin. So it's a safe valve.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't look so much. And it stopped looking so much about the time he entered Rostov, I think.
Well, even before then, it didn't make sense to me that Putin was happy with this, because when he said, look.
Okay, looking at the chat, Ricardo says, Black Panther, Fannie Willis, putting my president in jail is the ultimate humiliation. I welcome our Chinese overlords. Literally anything is better than this. Bro, you don't realize how good you've got it. All right, you've got a life. You've got a family, community, friends, I assume. You've got, all sorts of things going on in your life. You've got, more freedom than most people in the world. And to think that anything is better than this, that's delusional. Like, whether or not Trump is put in prison is going to have almost no effect on the quality of your life. Whether Donald Trump or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is president of the United States, it's not going to affect your life very much. Now, it's fun to talk about. It's interesting to talk about. All right, it's what we do instead of playing video games because we're interested in politics. But the idea that anything is better than what you have right now is absurd. You've got it so good. You've got it so good. It's only humiliating if you live a great deal in an abstract world where you're thinking about these issues as I do and as you do. But that's because we have the luxury of living in this abstract world. We don't have to, fight for our concrete survival. Okay, let's have a look at more of the chat. Trump will go all Andrew Sullivan in prison. Imagine if Donald Trump is president from prison. Trump should have read the academic literature. Then he'd have known that electoral fraud doesn't exist. No. What the academic literature says is that we don't have any evidence that electoral fraud decided the 2020 election. Would I vote for an imprisoned man? I would vote for an imprisoned man if it was in my interests. All right, if it was in the interests of my hero system. Elliot Blatt says, I think there's a 10% chance that Prigozhin is still alive. He has disguises and gold bars. He's probably in South America. Welcome to our Chinese Asian overlords. How does Trump's rape personality, how does President Trump's prison rape personally affect you? That's not going to last when our country looks like South Africa. Our country is not going to look like South Africa for at least 100, 200 years, if ever. Ricardo Williams seeing down the road. Stay in the pot, guys. It's not boiling yet. You've got it so good that it has spoiled you. Thoughts on the Republican debate? Why no live review? I didn't watch the debate. Watched a little bit of commentary on it. It seems like Vivek Ramaswamy is the fast rising Republican presidential candidate. Something like over 1 million people Googled his name within 24 hours after the debate. So his trajectory seems very much like it's going up. The presidential election doesn't matter much. Why are you covering it? Because I enjoy it. It matters somewhat, right? But I do these shows because I enjoy it and because I think it matters somewhat. A great question, like always, Bernard. So, for example, if Joe Biden had not been the president of the United States, I'm not sure that we would have backed Ukraine to the extent that we backed Ukraine. I'm not sure that Putin would have even felt the necessity of invading. That could literally lead to the end of life on Earth, World War III, some massive nuclear exchange. So to that extent, in that area, it's significant. So I think for 95 to 99% of the people, 95 to 99% of the time in America, it doesn't matter for their daily life who's president of the United States. But for people who live in a largely abstract world, as I do, I don't have family. Right, I don't have those kind of obligations. I have a lot of time to spend thinking about politics. And if you're, in the chat, you probably have a lot of time to spend thinking about politics as too. It is something that we enjoy. And it has a moderate to modest effect on the quality of life in America, who's president. We love Vivek. Not going well for Ukraine by the looks of it. Who are my top 3 candidates for president? Well, I think I said last week, and I still stand by this. From everything I know, Ron DeSantis is the most effective governor of Florida, is the most effective governor in the United States. And from everything I know, Ron DeSantis would be the most effective chief executive from a conservative or right-wing point of view compared to all the other candidates. I think that is indisputable. Now, who's more electable, Trump or Ron DeSantis? I have no idea. I don't feel a particular tug either way. I'm not, more Ron DeSantis or more Donald Trump. It does seem to me that Ron DeSantis is a much more effective CEO. He's a much more effective executive. He's a much more effective leader than Donald Trump. And Vivek Ramaswamy, without knowing much about him, he just seems to leave me with a good feeling compared to the others that I've not looked into him deeply. Does it bother me to see presidential candidates with Israel lapel pins? Yes. All right. America is not benefited by presidential candidates wearing Israel lapel pins, right? If you're running for political office in America, the well-being of Americans should be your primary duty and your primary preoccupation, not the well-being of Israel or any other foreign country. So you should not have to declare on your level of support for Israel or for any other foreign country, including Ukraine, when you're running for political office. All right, so I am opposed to giving military aid to Ukraine, and I am for a more distant relationship between the United States and Israel. I think the United States has been overly involved with Israel since about 1967. Nikki Haley is outraged that Vivek won't be a doormat for Israel. What do I think of Trucker's Trump interview trouncing Fox? It's hard to know what the online metrics really mean. So I don't know, don't have a developed thought. That Israel pin is the political equivalent of a prostitute showing some leg to get some clients. So I guess my top 3 candidates for president, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy. The presidential election doesn't matter much. Why are you covering it? We could be decoding Andy Worski, but you're wasting time on Trump. It's not wasting time. It's interesting to me. It has some significance. It's a way. All right, guys like to measure themselves against other guys. We do it by how much money we make, by how much status and prestige we have, by how attractive our woman is, by how good we are at chess or basketball or video games or whatever contest. And so this is kind of an overwhelmingly male space where we compete who has the sharpest apprehension of all sorts of moving variables that are beyond any of our individual capacities to ascertain, but we have a go at it anyway because it's fun. And also because it has an effect on the future of our country and the future of our people. But in large part, this is an intellectual exercise. It's the equivalent of playing chess. And so I have a go, you have a go, and we have a go at each other. It's a beautiful thing, right? I mean, COVID was fun because we all got to have a go at how accurate is our sense of reality, and how valid are our sources, and with incomplete knowledge, how well can we ascertain what's really going on around us? And that's the same challenge with politics or with almost anything else that we talk about. Ricardo says, I'm officially no longer a Republican after watching that debate. Well, for all Republican shortcomings, they are the least likely group in America to vote for reparations for American blacks. They are the most pro-law enforcement group compared to the Democrats. So I really don't think that you can, in good conscience, step away from the Republican Party. For all their shortcomings, they are still more on the side of law and order than the Democrats by a significant margin. Hey, Michelle from Belgium. Long time no talk. So, Michelle, I've known you about 10 years no, 15, 17 years. So when I was first going live on cam streams back in 2007, 2008, I met Michelle in the chat room. Oh, man. I want RFK Jr. to reform the Knights of the Round Table. I think RFK Jr. is unimpressive with his perspectives. You're lucky you don't live in the UK given the state of our right-wing conservative movement. I think from the little I know, it seems like Rishi Sunak is doing a credible job. The UK is the cultural heart of the pause. Well, it's definitely to the left of the United States. And it's also interesting that UK politicians are on average at least 10 to 20 IQ points higher than American politicians, but it doesn't seem to necessarily result in better governance. So the UK is in for very tough times in the years ahead. I mean, right now, it looks like Brexit was a major mistake. And I thought Brexit was a great idea at the time. Yeah, cam streams, like the first time I just live stream, just kick it, we'd have like 5, 10, 15 people. I had a famous French composer in my cam streams, and he even made a composition for me that I was some kind of shock. Luke got blown the F out on COVID. I think I did okay. That the establishment did better than expected. That the elites did better than expected. That our health officials did better than expected. That our pharmaceutical companies did better than expected. Getting a drug vaccine for COVID in less than a year, I think, was an amazing job. Forty's getting vaxxed to the eyeballs. He's got more vax juice than blood at this point. Okay, let me pull it together. There was this beautiful Irish girl who used to be in the cam streams, Emma, from 2008. And then she went off with a musician named Luke. But we had a hurriquake in Los Angeles last Sunday afternoon. Here's Mickey Carlson.
It was heavily hyped, and by the time it got here, it was just a bunch of rain. Okay, it was like 2 inches of rain. There were no winds to speak of.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even feel like 2 inches of rain because you didn't see the trees almost blowing over. Very little damage, nobody killed. And I've taken on the unpopular position of that it was hyped because well after it was clear that it was just a bunch of rain, you were getting these buzzing alerts on your cell phone saying, "Do not drive anywhere unless it is to flee a flash flood." Okay, which seems like ridiculous overkill. I'm not in a flash flood area. Most of Los Angeles is in a flash flood area. People in the hills are. People who live near storm drains are. So why not just warn them? Why tell everybody they have to lock down in place?
The whole indiscriminate alert thing on smartphones is I'm against.
Right, and it triggered an obvious reaction among right wingers. I happen to be in a group of right wingers when it was happening. They're all saying, "This is just like COVID. They're locking us down again. We've been out on the streets. Everybody's driving. We don't believe anything they say." So they Fauciized themselves. They've made people distrust them, which is the last thing they want to do. And of course, it was hype because things develop a bureaucratic hype. Oh, we have all these reporters reporting their storm stories, and they got to come up with some damage. So they make up, they make the most of whatever damage they have. And also, it had a climate change, overlay, which is, see, this is what you get when you let climate change run rampant. You get storms like this. So everybody sort of wanted to push it for that reason. And it reminded me of Mike Davis's ecological disaster book, which is this book After City, of course, where he talked about tornadoes hitting Los Angeles. Oh my God. a tornado, you know, it's covered up by the press. And the only problem with the thesis was that nobody has ever been killed by a tornado in Los Angeles because they're so weak. Okay, and so the book says, oh, there was shattered glass all over the sidewalk because of this tornado. And you know, there's just a bunch of shattered glass. It was hype. So Hurricane Hillary seems similar.
Want to hear the most indefensibly indiscriminate alert ever? I was on my smartphone. This plagued me for some time. The Amber Alert, Mickey, for about 10 years ago. I don't know if this was this a New Jersey thing, the Amber Alert, or was it nationwide?
Here. Everybody has them now. It's like, it's like the SIG alert. So everybody has SIG alerts now.
This doesn't happen anymore.
So anyway, 2008 Chem Streams with Michelle, I met this French classical music composer, Pascal Dupin, who thought that I was somewhat of a shark. And so he composed what he called Ode to the Moral Leader. That was composed by Pascal Dupin. Here he is.
Lui n'a pas vu le serpent. Tout de même, un serpent, lorsqu'on est Orphée, que l'on sait charmer les fauves, et même les hommes, et aussi les arbres, et aussi les rochers, on devrait le voir, n'est-ce pas? Ce serpent.
But major modern classical music composer was
serpent qui gardait
often in my little Chem Streams chat room. All right, back to the Hurriquake. This is Robert Wright complaining about Amber Alerts.
Amber Alert. But it used to be that whenever a child was reported abducted in your area, and most of the time, this was just like a custody dispute or something, there was no physical danger posed.
Ricardo says, Luke is coming to the realization that IQ does not equate with wisdom. I think I always realized that. I don't think I've come to any realizations. The higher your IQ, the more comfortable you are living in an abstract world. All right, so this show is devoted to, abstract topics, and it is composed of people like me who largely live in an abstract world because we have an above average IQ, and so it's very pleasurable for us to live a great deal of our time in an abstract world. The downside to this is that we can become incredibly disconnected to reality compared to people who don't enjoy living in an abstract world, who frequently, if not usually, have lower IQs, but because they don't enjoy living in an abstract world, they are more connected to reality. So if you spend a lot of time in an abstract world, you're very likely to believe or be preoccupied with all sorts of ridiculous things because you are cut loose from the normal concerns.
To the child. There's just some pissed off spouse saying, whatever. And they would buzz everyone in the state.
Where was I when the earthquake happened? I was at home. Like, I felt my chair jolting. I was sitting in my chair at my computer. I think it was about 4 p.m. last Sunday afternoon. I felt it, but lots of people around me didn't feel it. I think the most intense I ever felt was like July 3rd, July 4th, I think of last year, when there was like a 7 earthquake about 90 minutes drive from here. I think 2 days in a row there was like a 7.1 earthquake about 90 minutes from here, and that was pretty intense.
Whatever they're doing, they're like walking on a tightrope between buildings or something. And, millions died. I exaggerate, but and you had to. This was the default condition was to be subjected to this until you Googled it and figured out how to go into your phone and change it. I mean, please.
Right.
I'm sorry
that's the thing with
herself, by the way, but. Yeah.
Although you don't know how to go and change it. I have a new car, and everybody's having a similar complaint about new cars. I have a Subaru, and it's constantly alerting me about things. And actually, they've all been helpful so far. Okay, but I wouldn't know how to change it. It's an incredible.
Like what kind of things does it alert you to?
On my limited. Oh, it tells you when you're veering out of your lane. It tells you when you're stopped in traffic and the car in front of you has moved and you're sitting on your cell phone. Oh, I better go because the car in front of me is moving.
Yeah.
It tells me when I'm going too fast into the car in front of me, so I'm about to crash into it.
Huh.
All those things are useful.
I don't have those last two, but I'm happy with what I have. I like the basic.
But there are a lot of complaints that the cars now are saying, isn't it time for a cup of coffee? Wouldn't you really like a cup of coffee?
Oh, yeah, mine has a little thing that shows up. Yeah, a little coffee icon.
Does it say it? Is it subsidized by Starbucks?
No, it doesn't speak to me about that. No, it's just a little thing shows up in the dashboard.
Wouldn't you like a nice cup of Folgers now?
Yeah, but I'm pretty happy on balance with the way mine works. I mean, if I've got the thing fully engaged, it doesn't just tell me when I'm crossing my lane without a blinker. This is on the highway when I'm going fast. It guides me back into the lane. I love it.
Well, there's a button I can push to have it do, but I know where that button is. Or I used to. But the basic problem is it taxes the limited bandwidth of boomers into figuring out how to change all these things in settings. Whereas I think the younger generation does that instantaneously, and it's no big deal for them. But it is a big deal for us.
It is no small thing. It's no small demand on our limited cognitive resources.
I have a feeling we're going to run out of time, so can I make my pessimism optimism point?
Do it.
Everybody was saying that candidates should be more optimistic. The candidate who was pessimistic doesn't do well. Look at Reagan; he was optimistic. And Ann Coulter, I cheated on you. I did a podcast with her, and she basically demolished.
You've done that before.
I know.
And what, you think it doesn't hurt me or something? What do you think I am? You think I'm a fucking robot? You think I'm an AI? I don't have feelings?
I'm Alpha Bob. I don't have to deal with
I think we established in the regular podcast that actually you're not.
I don't have to show empathy for your pain. Biden has to show empathy for your pain. I'm not running for president. I don't have to. I just proceed willy-nilly along my course. And if there's some roadkill along the way, like your ego, we don't care about it. Anyway, she demolished that point because she pointed out Reagan was basically, when he ran against Carter, was very pessimistic. He was constantly how horrible things are you better off? The country's going to shit. And it was after he did have a sunny disposition, but after.
When did the Morning in America stuff come?
Morning in America came after he'd been president for 4 years. That's the point. So he always saw America as a shining city on a hill, but he was basically pretty pessimistic. And my point is that today's pessimism is a little different. People don't want like a sunny outlook, everything is happy, and the American dream works. That's Tim Scott's message. They don't want that. They see a future, and they don't see a happy future. They see a future of robots and AI and class stratification and stratification by IQ and the Bernstein nightmare and the elites.
Yeah, I barely can talk to anybody, Mickey, without them bringing up the Bernstein nightmare. It's just she goes, hey, how you doing? And they say, well, if it weren't for the fucking Bernstein nightmare, I'd be a lot better.
Well, you're in Princeton, Bob. That's the capital of the Bernstein nightmare. They don't think about the other people, the little people who
are left out. I just want to establish the Bernstein nightmare is not just your weird obsession. Everyone is talking about it.
You're the capital of the cognitive elite.
There's jokes. Oh,
anyway, people see a future that's pessimistic, and they don't want somebody who's sunny about it, but they want somebody who holds out some hope that there is a future, that it will all work out. There's a future that will be okay.
And I am that man. Is that where we're heading? I am that man.
You're not that man. Yeah, what will their lives be like in 50 years? It'll be so fucking good. Okay, they don't want it to be happy and everything is a shining city on the hill. They just want some hope. And the candidates, DeSantis sort of tried to do that, and he did like 50% of it. That was better than the other people did. But what is so great about this future? Obviously, there'll be tremendous medical advances. That's good. We'll live longer. That'll be good. But we're declining power. We're facing a rising power. Everything, all the signs are dark. And the question is, so that's my response to Coulter. We don't want sunny Reaganism or what's imputed to Reagan, but we want hope. And he's not exactly Vivek Ramaswamy himself.
Well,
okay, talking here about the latest indictments.
Now, this is my question. Wait a second. Now, is that, for much of his audience, is that evoking black people? Is that what they're thinking? Overweight black people on welfare? Because
I don't know. I mean, it's.
All right, let me rewind here.
I don't think it's just politicians, political elites by any means. But anyway, our commenters, as for my other problems, they're the obvious ones, and our commenters kind of took care of it.
They got the Epstein one wrong.
Well, that's a question. First, let's get to the part about obesity. The obese milking welfare. I mean, that's like a big chunk of the song. He revisits it. He first of all refers
talking about the rich men north of Richmond
to obese people on welfare, and then he goes into later, like, if you're 300 pounds and 5'3", you don't need food stamps. I mean, give it a rest, dude.
He's not exactly Vivek Ramaswamy himself.
Well, but this is my question. Wait a second. Now, is that, for much of his audience, is that evoking black people? Is that what they're thinking? Overweight black people on welfare? Because
I don't know. I mean, it's not in so many words evoking black people, because there's a whole lot of obese white people on welfare too.
But maybe they think
Okay, so let's say it does evoke black people. Is that for reasons that are rooted in reality, or is that for reasons that are just pure meanness, racism, and bigotry? Because if, for example, black people, say, weighed more on average than races of same height, or if they took disproportionate amounts of welfare compared to other groups, then it would indicate that that prejudice has some basis in reality.
He thinks, but my friends aren't on food stamps. I mean, there's a ton of obese white people in the Trump constituency. You travel across America, middle America has no small number of obese white people.
The great danger is white people in J.D. Vance's country going on welfare where they haven't been before. So he has he is speaking very fairly precisely at what the greatest danger is, if you want to give him credit. And if you don't want to give him credit, he was making a racist appeal to white people.
Or in any event, as our commenter Taylor Washburn said, it's mean-spirited. It's a nasty way to talk about your neighbors and fellow citizens. I agree. Here. Plus another thing. It's like obese people, as if, oh, where's their agency? Well, look, this fucking guy apparently had a serious drinking problem.
So a lot of people I know, looked out on the taking of welfare, and then some of them have changed, and they say, look, if everyone else is working the system, we should work the system too. So I'm of the former camp. I think there's something shameful taking welfare if you don't absolutely need it.
Until 2 months ago, and then said, God, if you'll give me a hit song, I'll straighten out. I don't think he said that, but he made some deal with God. But I mean, if I had said to him 3 months ago, look, you're a fucking alcoholic, you don't deserve shit.
This is Ricardo in the chat. He says, I hate Robert Wright, the ultimate spineless weasel. Bro, he's just has a different hero system than you, right? He just experiences life differently. It doesn't make him a bad man.
From the government, whatever subsidies you do enjoy, we're taking away. You've chosen to be an alcoholic. What would you say about that? I mean, the truth is,
I think he'd say, I'm not taking any subsidies. I'm a farmer.
I'll bet he is taking some, and that's another thing he doesn't understand. But
so the 12-step perspective is that we don't choose to be addicts, that addiction is something that creeps up on us. We do the best we can with the tools that we have at our disposal, and what often turns into a compulsion or an addiction is some coping mechanism that we may have developed, such as drinking or gambling or using pornography. And then the coping mechanism over time becomes maladaptive. So it's a useful perspective to help the addict overcome or move through self-hatred, which is something that has been a tremendous problem for me. I've just been overwhelmed by self-hatred through much of my life. It's only significantly started to diminish in the last 7 years.
Welfare's money goes to people who could work and don't, and that's what he means by it. And I think you're right to stigmatize those people.
Well, I think someone who's been an alcoholic or any other person should recognize that, like, when you see.
I agree with Ricardo. Welfare is shameful. I didn't work for 10 months. I drained by 401k instead of taking unemployment. Ricardo says that Robert Wright's hero system doesn't change the fact that he's a spineless weasel. His hero is money and status. He'll read the room, say whatever he thinks he needs to get ahead. That's not fair. That's not true. He has often said unpopular things. He is strongly opposed to U.S. military aid to Ukraine, to our current policy with regard to Ukraine, which is a very unpopular position among the elite of which he is a member. So he has taken a lot of unpopular positions.
See an obese person, you don't know why they're obese.
He co-hosts a show with Mickey Kaus, who is considered outside the Overton window by much of the elite for his anti-immigration and pro-Trump stances.
They may have a serious metabolism problem. It may be X, Y, Z. We are all, let me finish. We are all.
Robert Wright stands for nothing other than avoiding pain, says Ricardo. You should read his book. Did he write one called The Moral Animal? He's written a lot of thoughtful, often brave work. He's very much of a Darwinian. He very much believes that there are profound biological differences between men and women, for example. So I think his first New Republic cover story was, bad news feminists. Charles Darwin has bad news for feminists.
Victims and those of us who have relatively good lives are just fucking lucky. We were born with whatever genes we have and into whatever environment we were born into.
That is not the.
And Ricardo says Robert Wright's Ukraine stance is rooted in his physical cowardice. Well, is your Ukraine stance rooted in physical cowardice? Is my Ukraine stance rooted in physical cowardice? That's a cheap shot, bro.
Mindset of this song. The song is not empathy.
I understand that. I understand that there's a difference between my mindset.
Universal recognition of blamelessness. It is a pissed off song drawing some distinctions. And the other way it's unempathetic is not empathetic to Epstein's victims. He's basically saying, why are we spending so much time talking about these pretty girls who are underage who were victimized by Epstein on his island? Let's talk about some West Virginia coal miners. That's more important. He is explicitly pissing on the cause of the Epstein victims.
Well, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. I thought that the populist critique of elite oppression included the whole Epstein phenomenon: rich and powerful men having things their way, and then covering it up when the police.
Well, so he should be allying himself as a fellow victim with it. But he isn't doing
song.
that.
It's incoherent.
No, that's why.
And Ricardo says, just listen to his voice and look at his face. Well, he didn't choose his voice. He didn't choose his face. All right, his voice and face are largely the result of the genes that he was born with, and then his early imprinting. Right? You have to get voice lessons to change your voice, change your life.
It's an interesting song because he has all these weird takes. that are not the conventional take they do
but they are
expect.
in.
You think Robert Wright has ever taken a punch? I do, because he grew up in Texas. And I suspect people who grew up in Texas have taken a punch.
Coherent.
It's not incoherent. It's a perfectly plausible thought.
You just despise Robert Wright because he's that rare non-Jewish member of the intellectual elite. And you think, he's a goyish cup. He doesn't belong there. Goyish cup is Yiddish for Gentile brain.
These are rich privileged. They actually aren't rich privileged girls. They were lower class, working class girls. A lot of them.
Aside from its being crude, mean spirited, and incoherent, I have no complaints about it. I actually like the tune.
The thing I like about it, other than the fact that it went from a tweet to #1 in America in like a week and a half, is the way that these guys write these angry songs. I'm filled with rage against the elites. I just hate the way our society is going. We have to do something. We have to get angry. We need a revolution. Then it becomes a hit, and they go, "Oh, I'm so grateful. I feel blessed that you've made my song #1 song."
Well, you also did you hear him? Did you hear him where he said,
"Right, the more successful you are, the more rooted, the more you'll be in the current system. The more allegiance you'll feel for the current system. The more gratitude you'll feel for the current system that protects you and your private property. Right, the less you have, right, the less reason you'll have to feel allegiance and respect and gratitude for the current system."
And this may be in reaction to blowback that it's implicitly racist or this or that, but where he says, diversity is what makes America great. We're a melting pot. Did you see that little clip?
No.
Oh, yeah. His fans were disappointed.
Ricardo says, Robert Wright is a traitor to his people. Hey, he is not pro-Israel, right? He's doing a series on the Overton window. Episode 1 was on Israel and against American support for Israel to the extent that we've been supporting Israel. Physiognomy is real, says the chat. The wealthiest of people and corporations receive hordes of welfare from the government. It's honestly shameful to not juice the system for whatever you can when in a lower position. Well, it's not a good idea to do this if it has a negative effect on you. Everything we do has an effect on us. So I remember one time I was driving along and I came to a sudden stop, and someone in an SUV just ran into the back of me at a substantial rate of knots. And I was driving like a 1-ton Dodge, B350 Charger van. And so I didn't sustain that much damage. I had a seatbelt on. I didn't sustain any physical harm. And the next day, I exchanged information with the driver. The next day, his insurance calls me and I said, "Hey, I'm fine. I'm not making a claim." And the insurance adjuster was just shocked that I wasn't trying to juice the system. But when you juice the system, it takes a toll on you. For example, you make some kind of claim, you're strongly incentivized to exaggerate or to plumb the depths of how your life has been diminished by the incident. And so then you spend much more time thinking about how you've been harmed, how you've been victimized, instead of building a great life. So when you give in and start juicing the system unnecessarily, it has a negative effect on you.
When people were going, "Oh shit, we thought he was a good guy."
Yeah. The best thing about Vivek Ramaswamy's closing speech, I thought none of his speeches were all that good except for the closing, and by then people tuned out. But he said, we laud diversity in America, but we overemphasize diversity at the expense of our unity and identity and how we're all together as equals. That was in a very good way. It got like 85% of the critique of diversity in a way that appealed to people, and I thought that was great. So I don't mind people say diversity is a strength if you also say it's overemphasized and the important thing is
he scares me as a phenomenon, and it's just generic. It's not really even about his ideology, but just a phenomenon that we've seen more and more of. A rich guy decides to elevate himself to prominence by running for president. And
that's what I was going for in my Senate run.
How did that go for you? Maybe you need to be rich.
So for many Jews, they would not take welfare, right? Many Jews considered it shameful to take welfare, and they instead relied upon the community if necessary to help them through. So there's unfortunately a substantial portion of Orthodox life that is quite willing to juice the system for all it can get, but there's also a substantial portion of traditional Jewish life that would do everything it can not to take welfare from the government.
Well, I need
or more feeling charismatic or something.
There's that, but go ahead, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I mean, you get the idea. So we're moving toward oligarchy because, okay, so the two guys on the Democratic side last time, like Andrew Yang and whoever that billionaire was, okay, they weren't good enough to do well. Ramaswamy probably won't be the nominee, but he is very skilled. He says, and he is completely cynical so far as I can tell in terms of which positions he'll take. He's like, and it would be catastrophic if he were president and did the shit he's saying he's going to do.
But until one of these guys is actually elected to something,
you see where it's going. He's good.
Well, it's going. Well, the technology and various forces enable a guy like that. He's also a complete stalking horse for Trump. So he's totally just doing Trump's bidding. He's saying nice things about Trump. He's diluting the field. taking votes from anybody who could challenge Trump. So there's that. I think he's a little bit of a flash in the pan. I would be surprised.
Yeah, but
I would be surprised if he does well in more than one primary.
Mickey, you're mentioning that technology makes it possible. Naturally turns all of our minds to my 1985 piece in the Sciences magazine called "Democracy's Impending Demise."
Okay, so this is Mickey Kaus's take on the latest Trump indictments.
I want to deploy my big theory on Trump before we run out of time.
Sure.
My big theory, everybody's saying Trump, he's so dominant, he sucks the oxygen out of the room. I think the past few months have been very good for Trump because first you have to remember, people remember the Trump years fondly. They were good years until 2019. The economy was doing very well. The vast areas of flyover country were doing very well. People have a good memory, and they tend to forget how crazy Trump is. So when Trump goes off screen for a while, i.e., he's off Twitter, he's being indicted, he's otherwise busy, he rises. People don't remember how crazy he was. And so they had the Des Moines Register had concrete evidence that when they indicted him, he rose in the polls. So people have sympathy for him because he's indicted. And because he's indicted, he talks about his indictment and not the other crazy shit that he would come up with to fill the available media space if he wasn't indicted. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me the chances of him actually beating Biden have risen dramatically for that reason. People remember the good times. He's not reminding him how crazy he was. And he has sympathy for being indicted. And it's an incredible pylon. 4 indictments of the leading I mean, it's a ridiculous liberal pylon. And people are realizing that. And it also, Biden's having bad weeks. He's allegedly being attacked for not feeling empathy and feeling people's pain. All those are unfair, but nevertheless, they're having a toll. So I think this week dramatically shifted in sort of your direction of, God, the Democrats have to dump Biden if they want to stave off Trump. And I think, the idea that Trump can't win, so the Republicans have to dump Trump, is fading. Mm-hmm. Our one hope is that he's now on Twitter again, so he'll start saying crazy things.
Is he on Twitter again? Is he on Twitter?
The day of the indictment, he went back on Twitter.
Is he calling
and
it
Musk
Twitter?
let him back on, so it's being considered a courageous act.
Is Trump calling it Twitter or X? If we keep calling it Twitter, I'll vote for him. This is an important cause to me.
Anyway, that's my theory that.
Well, let me ask you something.
Okay, so I think that's pretty commonsensical. Trump is being given the advantage by being indicted. It means that he's got the Republican presidential candidacy, in a stranglehold, and it's also seeming to help his standing vis-a-vis Joe Biden. All right, main topic I want to talk about today is this David Brooks essay in The Atlantic, How America Got Mean in a Culture Devoid of Moral Education. Generations are growing up in a morally inarticulate, self-referential world. So I get to that in a minute, but I really enjoy the perspective of this frequently a science writer, David Wallace-Wells, formerly of The New Yorker. His brother Benjamin Wallace-Wells still writes for The New Yorker. David Wallace-Wells wrote a book about climate change that came out in 2019. It was quite pessimistic. Now he sounds more optimistic. And here he presents a perspective that I'm hearing more of lately, and I think is good news. I don't talk much about climate change because I don't know much about it. I don't have any strong views, but I think what David Wallace-Wells says here is good news. And if it's true, then yeah, let's embrace green technology.
Say a couple of things. One is that some quite trusted analysis suggests that at least 90% of the world and maybe 95% of the world now lives in places where renewable energy is cheaper than dirty energy. 90 to 95% of the world. Mm-hmm. It's in many places, including lots of the US, now cheaper to build a new renewable resource from scratch than to continue running at least an existing coal plant.
And the best renewables in that way are what? Solar, nuclear, what? I don't even.
Solar, yeah, solar. But it all depends on where you are and who. Like, England it's better to build wind, but in
Kansas maybe wind. Well, although they have some sun. Okay, go ahead.
But we still have this language of guilt and shame and competitiveness and cooperation, which I think is really blinding us to some of the dynamics here, which is really that we're in much more of an arms race than we are in a competition. In a competition to see who goes last. It's like
what do you mean by that? The arms race is in what?
We're trying to deploy more tech. I mean, China is not a perfect actor by any stretch. They have like half the world's coal. They're still building coal plants. A lot of their renewable tech is being produced under something like slave conditions in Xinjiang. Like it's not, I don't want to paint them as like a green dream.
Right.
But they have built roughly half of all the world's renewable capacity in recent years. They are building this year 150% more solar capacity than they built last year. So they more than doubled their solar rollout from last year. 10 years ago, they weren't exporting any cars of any kind. Now they're the world's biggest auto exporter, and their electric vehicle company is like poised to like really compete with the German companies and maybe even American companies, depending on how all that shakes out. They are like so gung-ho aggressive about building out green tech. They control 90% of the world's solar supply chain. Right. They see this as the industrial revolution of this century.
And do they see it that way because, well, maybe you don't know, but because they anticipate, they see that, look, this is becoming just cheaper. Everybody's going to want it cheaper than the carbon heavy alternative, or because they anticipate that this is the big crusade and people are willing to pay for it for environmental reasons. They just think it's going to be cheaper. Is that it?
It's not just cheap, it's also better in many other ways. So, I mean, we talked about some of the public health benefits. You know, we have 10 million people dying a year from air pollution, at least 8 million of them from the burning of fossil fuels. Like that is every single year. That is
Okay, so this figure, 10 million people a year dying from air pollution, but as I understand, the science behind that is pretty dodgy. We can't exactly say how air pollution is killing people. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I find David Wallace-Wells interesting here. I'm just wondering if what he's saying is truly reflective of the science.
Large cost. We have, you know, the people worry a little bit about the extraction, the mining that will be required for a renewable revolution. But if we imagine a world at net zero, the total mining that is required to produce that net zero outcome is something like a couple of percentage points of today's oil and gas extraction. So it's a much, much smaller footprint in that sense. It allows much more local control, national control over energy and transportation. It allows us to rebuild many of our, for the purpose of making them more carbon neutral, much of our infrastructure to also allow it to survive in a world beset by many more climate disasters. So for all of these reasons, it's just the future. Now, there are things holding us back, our status quo bias, our income.
Okay, so some possibly great news there from David Wallace-Wells. I don't know anything to dispute him. Right, the chat asks, will I be buying a Trump in prison or a Trump mugshot t-shirt? So I don't wear t-shirts with, any messages on them. I don't wear shirts, any accoutrement, any form of clothing with words on it. All right, I don't wear like Dallas Cowboys regalia. I don't wear political regalia. I live in West Los Angeles. Now, Beverly Hills is probably more Republican than Democrat, but no, I'm not going to be buying any of that. I don't know. Do I have a Make America Great Again? I think I do have a Make America Great Again baseball cap somewhere, but I wouldn't wear it out into public. The chat says, don't forget the corruption at the top. The new immigrants capable of successful fraud will only keep following the example set by our most successful. And Ricardo says, anything evolution-based is by definition not scientific. On what basis do you say that, Ricardo? Ricardo says, America's entire problem is that we're swimming in insular minorities who don't assimilate and take welfare. I don't think that's our entire problem, or even our major problem. Our major problem is violent crime. And also, America's welfare state is about the least prodigal of any major first world country of which I'm aware. We're the only first world country that doesn't have socialized medicine. Okay, you're saying, come on, mate, get to this David Brooks essay. I want to hear your analysis. It's David Brooks' essay. So I haven't live streamed doing the big show in a week, because instead I've been spending my time decoding this David Brooks essay, How America Got Mean in a Culture Devoid of Moral Education, Generations Growing Up in a Morally Inarticulate, Self-Referential World. So the key term that I'm going to jump on there is self-referential. I mean, that is the basis of Enlightenment thinking. That is the basis of modern, liberal left thinking, is that meaning is something that the individual can decide just with his own brain, that the buffered identity of the individual, aside from everything going on around him, he can decide for himself quite effectively where to get meaning in life and what is right and wrong. While the traditional perspective is that we are not primarily individuals with inalienable rights. We are primarily members of families, extended families, communities, groups, tribes, a nation. So I stand with the traditional perspective. We are primarily members of tribes. Right? We get our sense of meaning We get our sense of morality. We get our hero system, generally speaking, from our community, from our extended family, from our people, from our tribe. And so you won't understand me, without understanding the tribe of which I'm a part of. I'm a convert to Orthodox Judaism. You also won't understand me without understanding the people that I came from. Primarily 15/16 of my genetics is Anglo-Saxon, and 1/16 of my genetics is Chinese. So I don't hold with this self-referential worldview, but David Brooks here is criticizing the self-referential world that people live in now. But to do away with that, you have to do away with the whole edifice, the whole framework of Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment, liberal left thinking that dominates almost all of our institutions, our elites, academia, our educational system. It's all about that you should follow your own bliss, that you can develop meaning on your own, that you can decide for yourself what is right and wrong. Ricardo says evolution narrative was inspired by hating God and his son Jesus. Well, either it's true or it's false, or we don't have enough evidence. It doesn't really matter that much what inspires it. Ricardo says our welfare state funds our invaders. European welfare has historically gone to their own people. Right. So if America were less diverse, there would be more welfare. People feel much more comfortable paying taxes to support social welfare spending for their own people rather than outsiders. Right, how America got mean. So David Brooks says, over the past 8 years or so, I've been obsessed with two questions. Why have Americans become so sad? The rising rates of depression have been well publicized, as have the rising deaths of despair from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. But other statistics are similarly troubling. Percentage of people who say they don't have close friends has increased fourfold since 1990. Share of Americans ages 25 to 54 who aren't married or so or living with a romantic partner went up from 38% in 2019 to 38% in 2019 from 29% in 1990. A record high 25% of 40-year-old Americans have never married. More than half of Americans say that no one knows them well. Percentage of high school students who report persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness shot up from 26% in 2009 to 44% in 2021. Buffet. So am I pronouncing buffet wrong? How would you say buffet?
The Frenchman who makes French pronunciation videos here on YouTube, and we are looking at how to pronounce a word of French origin, but that is also commonly used in English. We are looking at how to pronounce this word designating a meal consisting of several dishes from which guests serve themselves. How do you go about pronouncing it? In French, we would say buffet, buffet, but in English or American, it is generally pronounced buffet.
Right, buffet. Fair dinkum. The chat says American conceptions of friendship is weird. Yeah, there's much more of a sense of mateship in England and Australia than in America. America is much more individualized, and by comparison to America, English and Australian culture is more corporate. It's more about mateship and your friends and getting along with your mates rather than just individual success. Why have Americans become so mean? Writes David Brooks. He says a restaurant owner told him he has to eject a customer from his restaurant for rude or cruel behavior once a week, something that never used to happen. Head nurse at a hospital told him that many on her staff are leaving the profession because patients become so abusive. My question is, those patients paying their way, or are they being subsidized? I noticed that people who are subsidized tend to treat others much more rudely. Hate crimes have risen, murder rates have been surging, and gun sales, social trust is plummeting. In the year 2000, 2/3 of American households gave to charity. In 2018, fewer than half did. The words that define our age reek of menace: conspiracy, polarization, mass shootings, trauma, safe spaces. So what the heck? Haven't I been pronouncing the T in buffet? I don't think I've been pronouncing the T in buffet. But what the heck is going on with America? And according to David Brooks, we're enmeshed in some sort of emotional, relational, and spiritual crisis. It undergirds our political dysfunction and the general crisis of our democracy. What is going on? There have been various explanations. There's the sociology story that we've stopped participating in community organizations and we've become more isolated. There's a demographic story America, long a white-dominated nation, is becoming a much more diverse country. And these changes have made millions of white Americans panic. Sociologists undoubtedly right. We're more isolated, but why? What values lead us to choose lives that make us lonely and miserable? And we inhabit a society in which people are no longer trained how to treat others with kindness and consideration. The society has become one in which people feel licensed to give their selfishness free rein. David Brooks says, the story I'm going to tell is about morals in a healthy society, a web of institutions from family, schools, religious groups, community organizations, and workplaces help form people into kind and responsible citizens, the sort of people who show up for one another. Now we live in a society that's terrible at moral formation. And he says that along with this ethos of moral formation that's dominated America for so long, it has prevailed alongside all sorts of hierarchies that we now find abhorrent, white superior to blacks, men to women, Christians to Jews, straight people to gay people. But you can't have a society without hierarchy. All right. So in our current hierarchy, it is the educated who are generally considered superior to the less educated. The higher IQ are generally considered superior to the lower IQ. Those who articulate the right sort of social justice positions who are considered morally superior to those who can't. Those who embody the disengaged, buffered, autonomous, strategic self advocated by modern left liberalism who are considered morally superior to those who have more primal and primitive connections to, say, blood and soil moral formation. So, to me, what's going on is that we're suffering a decline in social trust and social cohesion brought about by the triumph of this individualist Enlightenment perspective of left liberalism and by the civil rights industrial complex, which brings about unprecedented amounts of government intrusion into our lives and incentivizing costly litigation, costing billions and billions of dollars, and we have diminished our traditional understandings of private property, the US Constitution, and freedom of association, and we've also allowed it enormous amounts of immigration. Put this all together, Americans have less in common with each other, and they feel fewer incentives to bond. Remember being at Sinai Temple in Westwood, and the then mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, encouraged us to talk to someone who doesn't speak our language. So how are we going to talk to someone who doesn't speak our language? So the quality of civic life has significantly declined in America over the past 50 years. And so people are rationally isolating more, and lonely people tend to be unhappy and mean. Now, I used to think moral education was where it was at. That's why I got so enthused about Dennis Prager and ethical monotheism and Judaism and the Torah. But then I realized to my chagrin that moral education didn't really make much of an effect on me nor on other people I knew. I also noticed to my chagrin that religious transformations also generally didn't make much of a difference to the moral character of most people I knew. What it did seem to make a difference was when people got bonded and got happy. I noticed many people morally improving when they got married. I noticed that happy people naturally incline towards moderately helping others, people who are happy and have strong bonds, right? Very different quality of lives compared to those who lack such bonds. I noticed that lonely people are always miserable and pretty much a threat to the well-being of people around them. So I noticed that atheists with strong bonds, with strong families, tend to be far finer and happier than religious people I know without such attachments. So it basically comes down to the quality of your attachments. What are the quality of your relationships? What are the quality of your bonds? When we live lives embedded with other people, we will be shaped by those relationships, and we will generally live in a pro-social direction because we don't want to hurt those things that are most precious to us, our relationships to others. So if you like your boss, you're going to carry a sense of your boss with you, even when you live stream, even when you're going about on your weekend. If you like your spouse, if you like your kids, if you like your friends, if you like your community, if you like your church or your synagogue, you're going to carry a sense of those bonds, those connections, those attachments, those relationships with you through everything you do. And you're not going to want to bring shame or harm to the people you love. Now, all things being equal, do genetic similarities predict closer ties than less genetic similarity? And evidence is pretty clear, all right? The more genetic similarity you have with others, the more comfort you'll feel with them and the better you'll treat them. So by and large, adopted children are not treated as well as biological children. So let's have a look at the chat. depends on the type of place where you grew up in America. American culture is dead. Everyone is raw now and so much tanner than they used to be. Rap was the last mainstream genre pushed from the top down. Well, I didn't know how much it was pushed from the top down. I think you could just as much make a case it grew organically from the bottom up. It's like a primitive form that you'd expect to appeal to people with lower than average IQs. Marriage and happiness, pretty conclusive. Says Doovid's in the chat, and let's bring Doovid into the show. So, Doovid, how's it going, bro?
Baruch Hashem.
So, what's been going on with you?
Thank God. Yeah, I was reading the article, so I don't know if you want to jump straight into what you were talking about, or you want to hear what's going on with me.
First of all, tell me what's going on with you.
Well, just relevant to what we talk about. So in Detroit, finally, the downtown synagogue that did this liberal takeover, you got like $6 million in funds, largely from foundations, with our new Wexner Scholar Rabbi. And today was the grand reopening of the new, really imagined liberal social justice synagogue in Detroit that I guess, God forbid, I'm no longer a part of. So the mayor's there, and all the major foundations are there, and it kind of became like this elitist little pocket in Detroit. And I took Michael to the local Young Israel to introduce him to the rabbi there, who's actually on the conversion committee. And we had a little argument about Judaism where I was trying to explain to him conversion laws, and I guess kind of what we were talking about the last time, where it's like you can't just decide you're Jewish. Judaism is a set of rules, and there's no exception to them. And which generally I say for myself, that's why I call myself a half Jew, because there's no exceptions to the rules. The exception for me is that I'm not really Jewish; I'm only half Jewish. But we got a little argument about that, and we'll see what he's going to do.
Okay, and have you started participating more in organized Jewish life?
No, I just went to these series of like medical doctors, like my neighbors that were doctors that spoke, and the last one was like hardly anyone showed up. Although a few of the people I knew from the Kiddush Club, the last one was like a main Kiddush Club member. So they're actually semi-friendly to me and encouraged me to come back. But I didn't go to services this Sabbath. If I was up early, I probably would have went, but I got up late, and so we'll see what happens. But it's tough to fit into a community, and it'll tie back into probably the issue at hand. The article I was just looking at that you shared, the meanness, and my interpretation. So like, yeah, like come, it's nice. Can't we all get along? There's not going to be any politics. And even think of like Michael, can he drive to the shul? Does it make sense that he's going to drive to come to Sabbath services? And my interpretation is that most of these battles are zero sum. Just like at the downtown synagogue, these cultural battles. So I didn't have any like blowout arguments, but they won the culture war. I'm on the opposite side of it. Even if I went and they were nice, it would only be if I was like relegated to the sideline and kind of contrite to that they won the cultural war. It'd be the same thing if I went to my local Orthodox synagogue, like if I because that's my impression. These battles are zero sum, and as long as they're being waged, you can't really be at peace.
What do you make of all the different groups who claim to be the real Israelites? There's the Black Hebrew Israelites. Many Christians claim to be the real Jews.
I told Michael, like, my impression from reading the sages and the righteous people, and my recommendation to him is to look at Judaism as an ideal that you could never meet. You know, like I want to be a Jew. I was unsuccessful in my attempt to become a Jew. I'm still trying to become a Jew, as opposed to like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of Jews. So generally, I've been sympathetic to Israelite movements, and I've been um, questionable of this kind of like accepted, like, like of course these guys are Jews, and and God forbid, uh, because I went to hardcore Haredi institutes where basically like the martyr complex was very strong, and the rabbis put in like the main difference between a Jew and a non-Jew is the willingness to sacrifice your life. So this kind of like dark thing like you're a Jew, that means you're willing to die for God, and you should expect to be called up upon it. So kind of, so that I've been sympathetic to anyone who's willing to call themselves a Jew, and more questioning of this like accepted Jewish community.
And what's been going on with you intellectually since I spoke to you last?
I pivoted to the science of expertise, and I actually really enjoy my research now, because I'd done like 2 months of truth theory, and like Kant and Frege and Heidegger we talked about last time, and now I'm moving one thing more related to like, to some extent, the only successful thing I have going in my life right now is chess coaching, um, the theory of expertise. So there's a lot of different models, cognitive psychology. How do you progress from novice to expert? The nature of cognitive structures in the mind, questions of nature versus nurture, deliberate practice, hard work, and the various things. So I've been enjoying my research. I think you're just looking at the topic. It's a huge topic, and I'll probably continue on it for a few months.
And before we get into the David Brooks essay, I've struggled with self-loathing and self-hatred through much of my life, and I still at times think about things I've said and done that caused me great regret. Do you struggle with this? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a self-loather. That's why I took upon extreme Jewish spiritual inclinations, maybe like Calvinist leanings, that it's good to be a self-loather. Like the soul is trapped in the body, and taking human birth is a punishment. So that's probably what so attracted me to at least certain schools of Hasidic philosophical Judaism that helped explain my self-loathing. And it's like, no, actually, I'm righteous. I'm a good person, because I've recognized this truth that other people can't see. That so it's like we're already in hell, and taking birth was a punishment. So I don't know if you ever went that far in your Judaic studies, or the extreme Jewish theological positions like that would somewhat
No, I never went as far as that.
and even like the I was talking about the martyr complex.
I definitely have that. Yeah.
Saying like, well, one day my soul will be freed from my body.
Yeah.
So that like self-loathing is actually a sign of righteous. Actually, when I was young, it was in Duties of the Heart, and I remember the expression in the book, which I thought about for years, and it was that righteous people look forward to the day of their death. And I mentioned that to a few different people, and people are like, oh, that's dark. You like, don't think about it. And then also some of the rabbis, God forbid, serious opinions about the Holocaust. But this concept that righteous people look forward to the day of their death was kind of how I took upon like, oh, my self-loathing is a sign of self-righteousness.
And what about the idea of self-esteem? Is this something that you've thought about or read on?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot about that. And so there's self-efficacy versus self-esteem. And like self-esteem, being dependent on feedback, or you're just like kind of like a blind belief in yourself, versus a connection to expertise. Saying, I know what I could do. I know that if I say I could do something, I'm going to be able to complete it. I know relative my performance level to other people. That's self-efficacy, as opposed to self-esteem. Like, how do I look at myself? Why I hate myself. I used that Kurt Cobain picture, like I hate myself and want to die, which I think comes from Job, or there's other expressions like the Queen song Bohemian Rhapsody. like I don't want to die, but sometimes I wish I wasn't born at all, which I probably always felt that way, because I was a depressive youth, a troubled youth. So that extent, like self-esteem, I don't really have much self-esteem. And like I came like the Judaic value of humility, that self-esteem is a bad thing, versus self-efficacy, which is a recognition of your capabilities and potentials.
And how much did, say, the use of marijuana or the use of alcohol help or hurt with things like self-esteem?
Um, that was probably the main reason I used it, for depressive, and to stop myself from, I don't know, like probably like thoughts of self harm. I mean, it was a form of self harm, but from self sabotage, that I needed to do it in order to not self sabotage myself. And then, thank God I fell in love with the research. So at a certain point, I was able to just occupy my time with study, that my mind wouldn't slip into self sabotage, and I would just spend my spare time studying.
And how much did the practice of Judaism help with self-esteem?
Um, well, it didn't, because Judaism was the vehicle for me to recognize that self-esteem is not important. It's fraudulent to say that it's actually better. To self-hatred is actually a sign of righteousness. So it was Judaism that allowed myself, like, okay, I was chosen, I was special, because I recognize things that other people don't recognize, and that was a sign of my righteousness, like duties of the heart. So to say that, like, great minds, very few great minds are interested in spirituality, and the key difference of why great minds can't reach this level is because they can't recognize that, like, so to say, we're already in hell, and that the soul doesn't belong in the body. And so that's like the self-esteem. Like, why would I be proud of myself? It's a bad thing that I took birth. It's a bad thing that my soul landed in my body. So it took Judaism to give me an out on that, to say like, oh, I feel like that because I'm Jewish, and I feel like that, and it's a good thing because I had a intuitive understanding of the deeper uh, meanings of Judaism. And that's why I differentiated self-esteem from self-efficacy. That self-efficacy, like, so you work hard, you know how to do something, you could be proud of it, you could do it, as opposed to self-esteem. Self-esteem is the sign of basically a bad person, a person who has no enlightenment, a person who doesn't know the true nature of what it means to take birth, or the downfall of the soul into the human body.
So you embrace a type of Judaism that explained and provided comfort for how you felt about yourself. Is that fair?
Yeah, and then I found a circle of like Kabbalist Hasidim that embraced it, and relative. I went to schools that was basically all the descendants of Holocaust survivors, and I felt comfortable in that environment, and like people, God forbid, whose parents had been murdered, and glorified this extreme level of suffering, with not turning their back on God, or some sort of like, as the Hindus would say, "I'm not my body" attitude. So that like, just in the last few years of studying psychology, or like narrative psychology, I think that's explanatory of my psychological journey, and why I found solace in extreme Hasidic groups, or ended up in schools where basically I was completely surrounded by your descendants of Holocaust survivors.
Now, did being surrounded by those type of people, did that help, ironically, your self-esteem and happiness level?
Yeah, because I felt like I finally found community. That I finally found an explanation for why I am who I am, and a community where I could thrive, where people were happy to see me get ahead. And because generally I was just a lone wolf. I was, maybe I got ahead, but no one was happy to see me do well. At most, I had a few friends at a time, and of my peers, I was largely unpopular, or unliked, or just thought as weird. And then I was able to you find a community, like saying Yiddish, like that I could steigen, that encouraged me to do well, that we enjoyed our successes together.
And how would you explain the demise of that community in your life?
Well, I just got older, and those people became fathers, and I became an older bachelor, and so you probably, if you're Hasidic and you're like a father of many children and still have this kind of extreme ideology, it's probably based on being the descendant of Holocaust survivors. So I'm not a descendant of Holocaust survivors. I mean, although I have some, family members who died in the Holocaust. Generally, all my major family came to America before World War One, a Jewish family, and so my outlook was not in tune with the Hasidic community, who generally build up big families and have this communal structure based upon teaching their children and forming a safe community for their children, even though there was a large form of the alignment on, I guess, the self-loathing aspect. You say like Haredim, Hasidic Jews, maybe Orthodox Jews in general, also have this glorification of self-loathing.
Okay, let's get to the David Brooks essay, How America Got Mean. Here's the summary sentence. In a culture devoid of moral education, generations are growing up in a morally inarticulate, self-referential world. Any overall thoughts on this essay, David?
Yeah, well, I mentioned, to me, I mean, one thing, like, okay, obviously Brooks is a Jewish, and, we had went through that Rudy, the conservative author, I forget, was it Rudy?
Ronnie Goldman.
Ronnie Goldman, and kind of like his, like these leading Jewish conservative thinkers, and here you have Brooks as kind of like a conservative thinker, and so, one, he ignores kind of like the connection between conservatism and demographically homogenous white culture, or even white Christian culture, and I think he also downplays the aspect of the culture wars, where as I put it, most of these battles are zero sum, and you can't have any comfortability on abortion, immigration, demographics, Christianity versus multiculturalism. All these are zero sum, and one side's going to win and one side's going to lose. So to me, that has much more explanatory power than anything that he said. Although he says a lot of interesting insights that to me just fails to cover the main issue.
So when he talks about a self-referential world, that's one of the biggest differences between a traditional perspective and the modern liberal left perspective, because the Jewish perspective, or any traditional Jewish or any traditional perspective, is not a self-referential perspective. You don't create meaning or morality on your own. You learn it from your tradition and from your community. So to overcome a self-referential world would mean a complete change in the outlook, the worldview, the whole basis for modern thinking, to move from self-referential to a meaning and morality system that, instead of referencing the individual, primarily references the community. So that would require a vast sea change in our discourse and understanding for those with this modern left liberal self-referential perspective. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw you're talking about Oliver Anthony, and like that song, I guess, People Like Me, People Like You, and the question, what does that mean? People like me, people like you, the self-referential. So like I was saying, I was never part of anything until I came on to Hasidic Judaism. Then I felt I was part of something. Versus what it means to be American. And I get what I was mentioning. Okay, like they have the big thing, the downtown synagogue. They won. They got millions of dollars. They have a big endowment and a new building, and a whole bunch of staff. However, we're at war on these cultural battles. Like most of these things, like they don't want me there. Not necessarily because I was misbehaved or put, because I disagree so strongly with multiple ones of their tenets. So just if I walked in there, there would be like, oh man, this guy's there. He's going to start saying his things that we completely disagree with, that we're going to have to put down. We're going to have to explain why he's wrong on all these issues. And on the other side, if I went to my local Young Israel Orthodox community, it would be the same thing, where you say like, no, we are engaged in the cultural war, and I'm a threat on both sides. And yeah, I'm not sure the intellectual terminology he's trying to put it here into me, but to me it kind of just went past me. I'm not sure if it's really saying anything.
Well, I mean, I think it is pretty clear. I don't think you can understand people primarily as individuals. Rather, you need to understand them as parts of a team, a group, a tribe, a community. One cannot understand Dooovid or one cannot understand Luke Ford without understanding the community that they're either a part of or that they aspire to be a part of or have been a part of. I mean, so much of what we believe to be right and wrong and the source of meaning in life we get from our Orthodox Jewish community, and it's not just something that we invent on our own, as opposed to a lot of other people who say, oh, I decide right and wrong on my own. I decide community on my own. It's one of the biggest differences between the modern liberal left perspective on life, the Enlightenment perspective on life, and the traditional perspective on life. But it's not a difference with much importance, it seems to you.
Yeah. Well, it is. I guess I have an interesting point on that. If I could diverge for a second on the Oliver Anthony, if it's all right.
Sure.
My initial thought when I saw Oliver Anthony the first time, I thought it was Travis McMichael, from the guy who's spending life in prison for killing Ahmaud Arbery, which we talked about a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that partially is why he's so, like, oh, this guy who was wronged, and the conservatives falling around Oliver Anthony, and whether the song's that good or even his message. And I know, like Nick Fuentes, like, we don't want to hear whining white people. But I thought that partially, and I don't know how much he actually looks like Travis McMichael. Maybe he's just the same like hair color, but that's part of that. I don't know if you noticed that when you saw him, or you agree that he has some sort of likeness to Travis McMichael, or people might be falling behind him because they think Travis McMichael was wronged and shouldn't be in prison and wasn't wrong to kill Ahmaud Arbery.
I didn't notice that. I'll think about it.
Oh, so just a random. So yeah, so back to your question. I think I had fallen for the delusion still today to this concept of a rules-based order. So it's not necessarily tribal or my communal. It's this concept of a rules-based order, and my affiliation to the community is not. It's probably the way Brooks is looking at America and like the Ukraine war and all these various internationals. Like, oh, there's a rules-based order, and your problem is that you're not following these accepted rules. And so Dooovid be like, well, I'm not part of anything, but I understand the rules-based order, and I figured out how to get ahead in the rules-based order by following the rules. I could, make my money. I could potentially, find a woman and build up a family, have my part in society because I understand the rules and I follow the rules. And the problem, with people is purely based on their inability to follow the rules-based order, as opposed to an understanding of tribalism. And that's the question of America. Like, well, was conservatism something essentially unique to white or Anglo Christian norms that were when they were a super majority, or was it simply a rules-based order, like Vivek Ramaswamy or something like that, where it's like, no, it's the Constitution, and it had nothing to do with white people. It was just a good rules-based order system, and it doesn't matter whether you're white or not. It matters whether you follow the rules-based system. And so I'm not sure if you're saying, like, if you could differentiate it, just that you will even define community, that you could abstract and say, well, what is a community other than a rules-based order? But you're just like, no, nepotism is intrinsically a part of a community, and a community means that we don't enforce the rules-based system, and we inherently treat people of our own blood or tribe better than other people, regardless of whether they follow the rules-based order.
Well, you and I are both Orthodox Jews, so we're not going to be live streaming on the Sabbath, all right? We're not going to be publicly desecrating the Sabbath because that would go against what our community, what our God, what our our Torah says. So that's an example to me of living by a community-based, God-based hero system. All right, we have certain rules in our community. We're not going to be eating bacon cheeseburgers, at least publicly. All right, so that's an example of abiding by a community moral system.
Well, that's why I use the expression specifically, not moral system, rules-based order. It's like morality is a difficult word because that assumes like some question of good or bad, as opposed to rules-based order does not necessarily have any indication of good or bad. Like these are the rules. Your membership in the community is purely based on your following of the rules, and who knows whether it's good or bad. And we've talked about this many times regarding our position within the community. Like, if you're a rabbi's son or you're a big donor or something, they'll make exceptions to the rules-based order that they might not make to us. Say like you mess up one time, you're out, as opposed to like, God forbid, the people from prominent families or rabbis that did these horrendous things and they get moved around or no one seems to care. And that might make sense from like a tribal level to say, well, he's part of our tribe, like he's an important part of our tribe, and he broke the rules, but like it's not just about the rules, and you're not really one of us. So you break one small rule, you're out.
Okay, so there are communities with an attitude, you break one small rule and you're out, but there are also plenty of Orthodox Jewish communities that are more flexible and forgiving than that.
When to outsiders, I mean saying they're saying like, okay, you want to become a Jew, like I was telling Michael, like you gotta do all this stuff, you gotta follow the rules, and then you're saying, well, what about all these other Jews who don't do any of these stuff and are still Jews? But I said, well, they were born Jews, they don't have to do it to become a Jew, and then you're trying to convert. So I would say like, no, it's not. This Brooks concept of America as a rules-based system, as opposed to a tribal where even to say like, well, how does a Jew become a conservative? How does a black become a conservative? Well, you don't. And even say, well, I'm conservative. I'm a Republican Jew because I follow the rules. And it's like, well, you're still not really one of them. You're Jewish or like you're black. And then you're going to look, so what happens to you're like the white guy who breaks the rules? Well, we're going to give him a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance and a fifth chance because he's one of us. But if you're back in the old day, like decades ago, so if you're a Jewish or black Republican, you don't get that second chance. You break the rules once, you're out. And that's why I meant in Judaism, that's like, no, that's me or you as like a half Jew or a convert. Like that, the rules-based system only applies to you. If you're born in the community, they will give them a lot more chances. They will enforce the rules to a much lesser standard.
Right. So rules are always enforced by people, but if you're going to be part of a community, it means internalizing your community's hero system. And so nobody internalizes it and lives it 100%. I mean, Orthodox Jews break Jewish law all the time, but it's an overall direction of your life with a sensitivity for what your community considers most important. So if you're going to maintain your place in a community, whether your community is a STEM club, a cricket club, a life-saving club, or an Orthodox synagogue, you have to, generally speaking, abide by what your community regards as sacred.
Yeah, so in the conservative movement, the first thing that really broke down from sacredness was Christianity. And like maybe, historically, the first exceptions were made for Jews. You're probably going back to England, and like the first people that were allowed to enter parliament, Disraeli converted, and I forget the first Jew who didn't have to convert, or the various exceptions in American law. The very first minority exception was for Jews, that they didn't have to become Christian, to now Christianity is not that important. You have like Rundle or the Nick Fuentes, we can't have these people in charge of us, like non-Christians. The problem is that Jews aren't Christian and they have positions of leadership, and it necessitates, there is no such thing as a Jewish Republican, like by definition. To be a Republican, the first thing you have to do is convert to Christianity. And if you're a Jewish Republican, you're not really a Republican. So Brooks is that example. It's like, no, I'm a Jewish Republican. I follow all the rules except for the rule of Christianity, because that was just a stupid rule. And, so it's this question of what's the community based on? And if the community is based on blood or some sort of shared identity versus some sort of idealistic rules that people who are part of the community you'll follow.
So David Brooks says there's been a breakdown in moral education in our country, and I used to think that there was nothing more important than moral education. That was my perspective through my 20s, probably through my 30s, and it was really only once I hit my 40s that I realized that moral education hadn't had much of a positive effect on me, unfortunately, and I became much more skeptical of the power of moral education when compared to the power of forming attachments to people, such as getting married, having a family, having close friends, being part of a community. What do you think has more of an impact on people's individual choices and morality, moral education or the level of their attachments to other people?
Yeah, I mean, the attachments to other people some people give the quote to Hitler. I think he used it, but other people maybe in the past, the lowest level person forms by maybe it was racial identity, then religious identity, then ideas. But the people who are willing are going to be capable of forming relationships purely based off of ideals is going to be very small. And the natural method to form identity is just going to be racial or religious. And this question, I mean, so Brooks is kind of like a proto-Noahide, where he's saying it's good that we're no longer a Christian nation. However, the morality, like just follow the Noahide laws and, the moral laws and we'll be fine. But the problem is like nihilism, and morality implies this good or bad that to some extent has no basis in reality. It has only a basis in religion. That most atheists that argue that say this concept that the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished is fallacious. That there is no natural order that people get rewarded for being good people and punished for being bad people. In fact, it would appear that if you want to get ahead, morality will hold you down. And so I don't really see any system to get past it. You need some sort of God, a system of order, going to hell, punishment after death, or for any system of morality. And I think these secular morality systems, basically all fail. Everybody cheats.
So David Brooks, he's glad about the traditional American way of life with its community and with its moral education, but he deplores its racism and sexism. And it just kind of hit me as I was reading that a moderate application of what is called racism and sexism, meaning one, preferring your own people to other people, and two, recognizing that different people, including, say women and men, have different gifts. For example, that women tend to be much more superior at raising children, particularly babies and infants, when compared to men. That mothers can give things to their children that fathers, generally speaking, have a tough time doing. So it struck me that rather than being the antithesis of reality, the moderate application of racism and sexism are actually a commonsensical foundation for morality. You should prefer your family to other families. You should prefer your community. You should have a higher allegiance to your community than other communities. You should have a higher allegiance to your people rather than other people. And you should recognize that, for example, women have gifts that men, generally speaking, do not, that men have gifts that women, generally speaking, do not, that the gifts, for example, of Ashkenazi Jews are quite distinct on average from the gifts of Sephardic Jews or Mizrahi Jews, and the gifts of, say, Ashkenazi Jews and West Africans tend to be different. So what do you think about obviously you can go too far with racism and sexism. You can be obnoxious, you can be antisocial, you can be cruel and harmful and self-destructive, depending on how you apply it. But what do you think about the idea that not only is racism and sexism moderately judiciously used, not the opposite of morality, but it really provides for a normal person the foundation for morality by encouraging him to attach to a particular people, a particular community, and to recognize the different gifts that different groups have.
Well, I agree with a large part of it, and maybe it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the extremist Judeo belief that taking birth is a bad thing. It's a punishment for the soul to enter the body. In the extent, well, yeah, it's natural, but the tendency of the body is bad, and you should break these things. And that's the point of birth, is this struggle and war to go against these natural tendencies, and that's the definition of a righteous person that wins the battle against these natural inclinations. So you're trying to come up with some more like naturalistic, maybe Aristotelian view that it's better to be in harmony with these natural principles, as opposed to like a Muslim or extremist Judeo value that you should be waging war against these naturalistic tendencies.
And how effective did you find it to wage war on these natural tendencies?
On a personal level, like I would say largely successful over decades of character refinement, of being born again, becoming a new person. However, it isolated me to basically like following a rules-based order system that no one else follows, and the only thing to like pat myself on the back is that like maybe I'm going to go to heaven. Although I think like it was like self-efficacy. I've developed extreme levels of self-control, of maybe like purposeful living, of actualization of free will, your various concepts. So like I'm glad I did it. But from the human perspective, like I mean, it says in Tanya or the Talmud that like I killed myself through the original Hasidus of self-immolation, of destroying who I am in order that I would be able to properly serve God. And that the question, well, what did that get me? And well, maybe it's not supposed to get me anything.
Would you go to psychotherapy in an attempt to become, say, more happy or more effective or have higher self-esteem?
No, because I've ingrained myself with these Judeo ideas that, and it always irritates me. I mean, even when you say it, it's like happiness is for the weak, happiness is for the sinners. You're not supposed to be happy. You're supposed to serve God, and like God forbid. So generally, I look at that as just a bad character trait. Like people want to be happy, and you say, well, and I mean, I could argue it philosophically or theologically. And you're saying that's why I found I wasn't a happy person, so I found solace in extreme creatism or Hasidism. That there was some value on happiness, but generally, just looked at like like that's what's wrong with the world. Everyone wants to be happy. Like you have to break yourself. You have to go against your natural urges, even if it makes you like and maybe, I mean, to some extent, in order to become a Jew, I'm sure you had to go through quite a bit of that. But I guess you found some sort of solace within Judaism that doesn't take that level of like self-immolation.
Right. So what was provided the greatest meaning and purpose and joy and happiness and concrete moral direction in my life have been the friends I've made along the way, even more than the texts that I've studied and the rituals that I've performed. But if I can ask one more question.
This value on happiness that you didn't see, like within the Judaism, like so like it's kind of like you're trying to say, Michael, like you want to become a Jew. It's not about because it makes you happy. It's going to be hard work. You're going to have to do what they say, and you're going to have to put aside your own personal happiness. And I'm not sure. I would assume to some extent you had to have felt like that, or at least part of your journey, as opposed to you seem to be accepting this kind of like value that it means something, like I mean, like your personal happiness, or it's even saying, well, you obviously didn't take Judaism that seriously if you're so concerned about your personal happiness.
Well, you can find plenty of texts in Judaism praising the state of joy. I mean, there's just as much, you can make just as much of a case for joy in Judaism as you can for the dour approach that you advocate. So it's not like there's just one dour approach to Judaism. You are articulating one perspective within Orthodox Judaism, but you'll find many texts, celebrating a joyous expression of Judaism, that one should serve God with joy.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying that, from the schools I was part of or found solace in, just the type way you're speaking was like indicative of just like these like unenlightened people that are still concerned with their self-happiness.
Yes. And I am not attracted to the type of Judaism that you articulate, but I recognize that it works for many people. Now, consciously, I don't think I've ever made my happiness my number one concern, but I do want to feel a sense of integrity. So I do want to feel like the various parts of my life are working together and moving me in a positive direction that increase my connections with the people most valuable to me. And then a byproduct of that pursuit of integrity is happiness. But I don't believe I consciously choose happiness. I consciously choose to live a life of integrity. So my various choices through the day add up to something that moves me in a direction that provides a blessing to me and also to the people that I interact with. So I want a sense of integrity, a sense of wholeness, a sense that things are moving in a good direction overall. And that's the way I try to arrange my life. Now,
I would agree with that in largely, and we might just be playing word games, but just on the Jewish aspect, like we say in Kriyishma, morning and night, don't follow our eyes, don't follow our heart. And so we put happiness is like, well, happiness means following your heart. And so integrity means not following your heart. And like, in order for me to become Haredi, I had to break my heart. I had to, do the meditation, see, well, why does my heart want to do this, and go against my heart in this kind of like pejorative. Well, happy means just someone who follows their heart. And like Judaism's a religion that we say twice a day, don't follow your heart.
And yeah, there's plenty in Judaism that's quite at ease with recognizing the heart's natural inclinations and trying to channel them in a good direction. So Judaism's at ease with the human desire for sex, for love, for fame, for riches, just wants to channel these directions in a godly or pro-social direction. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, because there's schools of Judaism. So the first page of the Tanya says, King David destroyed his inner self, through fasting. And so you're like, there is no one school of, and there's different schools of Judaism that have different opinions on it. But, I guess for a decade, I was part of the extremist school that says like, no, you have to destroy your inner self. You don't embrace your inner self. It deserves to be destroyed. And, but yeah, obviously, like anyone who studied Talmud or knows the history of Judaism, there's always various schools, and you end up becoming part of a different school on that. But I would say no matter what school you're from, obviously there's serve God and happiness. Like, so the goal is to become happy, submitted to God's will, so that it's not like, okay, I used to be happy when I was serving myself and I destroyed myself and I learned to be happy as a slave, like King David. Like I'm a happy slave to God. And you could have the other school that will have more, you don't have to completely destroy yourself, and you could have some sort of dual service to yourself and to God, and true happiness. But I would say even on the flip side, you want to say you're the base Hillel and I'm the base Shammai in this one, that even on your school you have to recognize that no, you can't serve yourself, you have to serve God, and you can only serve yourself within the larger boundary of serving God.
Well, it wouldn't make sense to have no component of serving yourself in that God made you. And so by serving yourself, to as long as it's in harmony with God's directions, you are developing what God gave to you rather than trashing it.
Well, that's the theology, so to say, of your side, like the base Hillel side, the base Shammai side. Like, no, God put us in a testing situation, and we were made to destroy ourselves. That whatever you were, man was born an animal, and then at 13 you get the Yetzer Tov, and the goal is to wage war against the Yetzer Hara and complete victory. And who we are as an individual is more indicative of the Yetzer Hara than the Yetzer Tov. But so I mean, the Talmud clearly says, like, I mean, I remember this one even, the Gemara in Eruvin, I think like 13b, because I've said it so many times. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued for 2.5 years whether it was better for God to have created man, and after 2.5 years, Beis Hillel admitted to Beis Shammai that it would have been better had God not created man. So in that perspective, like even Beis Hillel recognizes that the true nature of man is somewhat bad, and it's unfathomable why even God created us.
So, to risk going back to the topic of self-esteem, do you think it's primarily genetics that accounts for your low level of self-esteem, or do you think it's because of events that happen to you, or do you think it's primarily the result of choices you've made?
I mean, it's probably a combination of all. Like, I was probably, my parents probably, I mean, God forbid, I don't, openly discussed it, but like I was the third child. My parents probably, like questioned whether they should have, really had me, because they were both working and didn't really have that much time to take care of me. My parents were workaholics, so I was kind of, to some extent, left to fend on my own. I grew up after the demographic change had already happened, so even by the time I was in third grade, whites were a minority, and I was constantly bullied, and physical violence and fighting from a young age was pretty normally. Like, I never had a regular, so to say, happy childhood. I never really had a basis of community or friends, and so I mean, I could give say that, okay, that it was negative childhood experiences that, and then my parents, for a period, they were in law school when I was born, and financially struggled to take care of us, at least for, I mean, now thank God they're doing quite well, but at least when I was a young child, I was a burden on my parents, who were just getting started in their careers or finishing law school. So I'm just, as like a narrative identity, I could like, if I was speaking to a therapist, just through self-analysis, see, like, yeah, like I'm a product of certain things that happened to me. I wasn't from a warm, loving family. My parents were workaholics who and I was post diversity and never really had that many friends, and faced bullying and various things, and didn't really find community till post adolescence. So it's very likely that those adolescence experiences, how could you have self-esteem when you don't have any friends and no one likes you? So at least in my childhood period, to say that that experience of not having a friend and no one liking me negated my possibility of having self-esteem. And even as an adult, where I found success, that like memory of the formative years of no one liking me negated me from developing healthy self-esteem. So I could accept that. Maybe like I could see a therapist and like, no, you could develop self-esteem, like even though I'm God forbid, I'm 45 years old now, like now I'm going to develop healthy self-esteem. And especially that I already went to Jerusalem and did all these various things, that was kind of counter to that. So but that's why I accept narrative identity, and say I don't really know who I am, and you could have different narratives that may or may not be true. And a lot of these things are just semantic, to because maybe at some level I have I'm a narcissist, and I have too much self-esteem.
And have you talked to God about this, and or rabbis, and did you get any answer back from God or from rabbis?
Well, yeah, that how I came that I was chosen for bigger things. One, that I somewhat recognized the truth of Judaism. I chose to become a Haredi out of my own free will and volition. I was willing to, at least for a period of time, to give up my family and friends and everything that I'd known, to move to Israel, and then to New York, and take upon a Hasidic identity. So I still talk to God about it, and so that's why I say, like, okay, I actually have enormous amounts of unhealthy self-esteem, that I think I was chosen from God to do something great. And part of the reason was possibly my negative aspect of my early childhood. And so if I lost my faith in God, so like God's still my best friend. I talk to God constantly, God's why I work so hard, because I still think I was chosen, possibly to do something great, even though I don't really have any other positive self feedback mechanisms. Maybe some YouTube viewers or something, but it's basically just my relationship with God that feeds my self-esteem, to thinking I was chosen for something great. And the narrative of my life story at least vindicates that, to where God's like my only friend. God's the only person I talk to.
And what would you say was the happiest year of your life?
I've never had like a happy year. Saying I was depressive from a child, and because like for most of my childhood, like I didn't really have any friends. I was bullied and unliked, and even my parents were workaholics who probably like struggled to at least the formative years, that maybe it was a mistake having me, God forbid. That was enough that even when things were going well, um, I had this level of self-sabotage, like it's not real. These people really don't like me, or I'm not going to give up all the work that I did just to become part of some community. So even when I started having success, even when I was integrated into the Hasidic community, and I could have maybe just became like a Hasid and got married and built up a family in Israel, I had this level of like self-sabotage, like, no, I want the truth. I'm not just going to normalize. And then when I started making money day trading, I also had like a little like self-sabotage, like, no, I don't want to just be like another modern Orthodox Jew in the five towns trading stocks. I want the truth. So I would say like I've never had happy years in my life.
But what about happy moments? Do you have any happy activities or happy moments these days?
No, I mean I don't. I remember as a kid I saw the movie Patent, and it resonated with me my whole life. Where he was talking when the Caesar, uh, George C. Scott in the movie is Patton, but he said the in ancient Rome, when Caesar would come back and uh, write on his charity, there would be a guy that would keep on saying into his ear, "All glory is fleeting." I don't know if you saw Patton or remember that
Yeah.
quote.
Yes.
So I've always had that, like, and obviously that came on to Judaism, and like I've always prayed, and so I always had that, like, all glory is fleeting. This isn't real. It doesn't really mean anything. So I've never been able to lose myself in the moment. Um, I know Freud mentions like eventually he comes up with, like, I think he called the flow or oceanic state, and he says he's seen it in other people, but he's never had it himself. Like the ability to just lose yourself in the moment. So I would say like that. I've never had the ability, like Freud. Like I've observed the oceanic state in other people, but I've never been able to experience the ability to lose myself in the moment.
And how attractive would a cult be to you if it, say, it offered you a spouse who you found attractive?
I'm like a prime cult type person. So even if it didn't offer me like a spouse, I would be like looking for cults. But like, I like cults. I like the idea of I defended cults. Church of Entropy, that was like part of our friendship, was our both kind of defense of cults in general. Certainly, like if I were able to uh find a wife and build up a family, it would almost definitely have to be within a cult framework. uh Although I use the word cult loosely, and I mean, we've discussed that. Like if you, I mean, when I was Hasidic, people, like I was in Bubba, a lot of people in Bubba used to joke about themselves like it was a cult. And I was under Amunis Yisrael, Rabbi Wolfson, who they called the Moonies, and so it was like a self joke that even people were part of it would joke like we're part of a cult. So I mean, I don't know if you'd consider Hasidic groups cults. Some people do, and you could even consider Orthodox Judaism, or even any form of Judaism cultish. So, but like generally, like, yeah, I'm pro cult like that. I think it's a good thing, and obviously there's dangers of it, and megalomania, or even goes back to the Brooks article, like the cult of America or something, the constitutional cult, or Christianity was originally called the cult of Jesus Christ. Uh, but so you could loosen the term to like America's a cult like that also.
And how tempting would it be to develop a cult of your own? Imagine that you develop hundreds of followers who donated money to you and wanted to meet with you regularly and hear you talk to them and counsel them, how attractive would that be for you?
Yeah, I'm an introvert. It wouldn't be like, I mean, people in your chat, like the cult of Doovid started on Luke Ford. People used to call themselves Branch Dooovidians, even like Ricardo. Um, but like, no, I'm not a people's person. I'm more, and I don't like dealing with other people's problems. Um, generally, like, I don't even like people ask me for advice. Like, like usually I would just kind of like, read these books or work harder. Like, I don't want to get involved in your personal details. And even like a rabbi, um, like a synagogue rabbi, a pulpit rabbi versus a scholar. But like, I mean, I think I was part of a lot of cults, and even like Hinduism. Like, I was part of the Hare Krishnas. You could even consider like the chess club, somewhat like cultish in some ways. I mean, I wouldn't use it in a pejorative, but um, so I think I've always been valuable to cults. Cults have a lot of times sought me out and sought my membership. Especially like when I first became Orthodox, like a lot of Hasidic groups recruited me, and even here in Metro Detroit, like Hindu groups, interfaith, cultish type styles. That I think it's kind of like it could go back to the rules based order. Like I used to tell Church of Entropy, like I'm good at understanding and following rules. So to like, okay, here's your cult, here's your rules. Can I follow them or can I not? And can I? And even like when we first started speaking about anti-Semitism and my grandparents, the original American attitude is like, people do not like you. You make yourself useful. So because I had that childhood experience of not really having friends, not being liked, um, that was always my strategy: make yourself useful. And I think that is probably most useful in cults. Saying like we were talking with Elliot back a few months ago about entourages, where it's like you could call like an entourage a cult, and it's like I've secured my position in this cult by making myself useful and being able to follow the rules based order.
And when were you in the Hare Krishnas, and to what extent were you in the Hare Krishnas?
Well, when I was at University of Michigan, in like they wanted to set up a chapter at University of Michigan, and I was, for a period, I was like their only non-Indian body uh, person willing to help them. So I never joined their cult because I knew I wouldn't be able to follow that level of the rules. And at a certain point, once they successfully, like I actually recruited, like I was somewhat their recruiter because they wanted just a base in University of Michigan, and so like I followed their teachings, I read their books, I read their literature, I understood their philosophy, I helped make their events. So there'd be like chanting. I helped explain their philosophy to other people. But at a certain point, they recruited enough people that officially joined that they kind of stopped inviting me. And then once I graduated, so, but I mean, so to say, I was recruited specifically because they wanted to set up a base at University of Michigan, and I successfully completed that task for them in helping them, even here in Metro Detroit and in West Bloomfield. But at a certain point, like I just didn't join, and so I could be considered like a friend of the movement, or someone who was useful. But at the end of the day, you have to join.
Now, I've noticed that I've become much less attractive to cults as I've aged. Have you noticed something similar?
Yeah. I mean, like at this point, it would basically be money or like connections. I mean, like when like I served with like the total sovereign Yitzhak Rebbe, and like he just turned 80 years old. Eric Adams met him in the hospital. Like he should live and be well. Like he might have to go on dialysis or kidney problems. But when he first came to America, like I did things like I was a driver, and like they raised money, and I used to go like the five towns, and you met like wealthy people. And so when you're young, they want you to join the cult. Like maybe you could be a member. And like I said, like if I had stayed in Israel, I probably could have became Hasidic, and got married and been just like an average cult member. In America, almost completely what I did for them. And then like, in Bubba, I wasn't a member. They knew I wasn't, maybe they thought I'd become a member or like a friend. Like I said, like I would marry someone else like myself, but it was almost completely based off of what I did for them. And generally that was something that couldn't be done by one of their own members, like University of Michigan. If they had one of their own members who was a student at University of Michigan and could have done for them what I helped them do, they probably wouldn't have asked me. And so also like, I did building permits, I did driving, I did a whole bunch of things. And at a certain point, they would prefer one of their own members to do something, except something that they don't want. Like we discussed, like the half Jew type thing, and like being a driver, or certain dealings with non-Jews that specifically they didn't want one of their own members, so they used me because they didn't want their own members doing what they had me doing. But like, yeah, as you get older, you have to deliver something big. You either need like government connections, building permits, or large sums of money. So like if you're almost 60 years old, like you got to give like six figures, like not even like five figures. Like you got to be giving six figures, or you got to have like an inside connection at the mayor's office. It's got to be something big.
Okay, let's welcome Claire Khaw to the stream. Claire, if you'll unmute. Claire, what has been going on with you? It's been a few months since I spoke to you last.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm mostly on Twitter Spaces now. You know, I've been deplatformed on my main channel, but my secondary and tertiary YouTube channels are still there. So I intermittently stream there. And Tom Sunik is talking to me tomorrow from Zagreb, so I'm very pleased about that. So yes, I've managed to keep myself busy, though I guess a lot of people will not notice such a presence now that I don't really stream that often on YouTube. But
and you've published a book on Amazon, correct?
Fancy forgetting that. Yes, I have. Thanks for reminding me.
Claire Khaw is still trying to make her own cult. Like, God forbid, the only person these days trying to recruit me to a cult is Claire.
It's not a cult. People keep calling it a cult. It's a new moral and legal political system that I'm trying to sell directly to the ruling classes in the hope that some of them might have a better side to appeal to, and some survival instincts that don't seem to be there. I really don't think they know what they're doing, because what they're doing is not good even for them. Which is, been my position all along. You can't hope to survive doing what you're doing. And really, free speech protects the ruling classes, because you want to know if people are not happy with the way with the way you govern the country. And you want to know, and you would want to correct yourself if people hate you. So, but they're not listening. Nobody is, really.
What's the name of your book?
It's called Secular Koranism. Thank you for reminding me again. And it's on Amazon for a song, really, when you think about the years that I've taken to write it. All right, I wrote it in a few months, but basically what has helped is really people disagreeing with me. So I want to give credit to all the people who've hated secular Koranism, pretended not to know what I mean, and made me say things again and again until I kind of honed it and distilled it to something hammer-like in its repetitive monogamy, but memorable for that, I like to think.
And you've been doing some Twitter Spaces, I believe, with Curious Gazelle. Anything you want to talk about that?
Yes, she's a very talented Pakistani lady who is, she says she's lost her faith, but I'm trying to get her to believe, because I'm saying, look, I'm just behaving as if I believe, so you should believe too. But I know she has a problem with talking to Muslims, and I know she hangs out with non-Muslims, and I can kind of see that it might be a problem if you don't want to say, ooh, Muhammad, ooh, the Arabisms that they have to do. And she does kind of resent me for well, she thinks I'm getting away with heresy and blasphemy that she couldn't get away with, and she would only be admitted in those circles if she wore a hijab and called everybody sheikh. But and she thinks I've been given a special pass because I'm not Muslim. And I mean, she says things like, "Oh, but they're so mean to the Ahmadis, but they're nice to you because you're, why are they so nice to you?" And I suppose Muslims hope that I will convert eventually, and I have to maintain my identity because I have to represent all these skeptics in the West who don't quite see the point of a theocracy. But I think maybe Dooovid will agree with me that even Israelis are increasingly discussing the T word.
Theocracy.
Yes.
If you want to bring this back to the cult issue, because kind of like I was talking with Luke, like when I joined, so to say, these Hasidic cults, it vindicated me because I was saying it wasn't something that was wrong with me, it was something that was wrong with the world, and then it's us up against the world. So some level, especially for cults that have lasted so long, religious cults, hereditary cults that have some sort of explanation for why you could have a multi-generational sustainable system of us up against the world, but like generally you're hoping that the world is going to come into compliance with the way you see it. So most cults are interested in talking to elites and rulers and changing their mind or winning people over, but at the same time, if you just get a few people, then those few people retract from the world and accept this mentality that it's up us against the world. And that's why someone like Dooovid was a prime candidate to join cults, because I had a high Q and was able of doing useful things, but then psychologically I was psychologically weak, and that I would accept like, oh, it wasn't me that was messed up, it was the world that was messed up. And now that I found this cult and we agree about all the problems with the world, and now I've finally been accepted. And I don't know
Yeah.
if Claire could pitch herself like that, where she's not arguing for mainstream Islam. If she, sort of like a cult, so in her dreams, she thinks that she's going to win over the elites. But if she actually had a few followers, then it might become cultish, where it's like, no, the problem's with the world, and you've been saved. With just our small group that's that we're going to wage war against the whole world together.
Well, no, I'm not interested in being a cult because it's not a belief system. It's a legal system, which is a methodology, it's a list of rules. It's a different list of rules to what we have now. And for me to, make myself into some kind of cult leader would actually undermine the basis of what I'm trying to do, which is to present to the ruling classes a better system that would make their lives easier if only they would listen. But I know they don't listen. And I
The
think
reason why
mostly
you'd be a cult leader is because in the pejorative, your set of rules is incoherent. So anyone that's part of it would, like no one could really be part of it because your set of rules is incoherent.
how
And
how
so
how is secular
just before you
democracy
argue back,
incoherent?
I was saying from the cult perspective is that it would be your authority that would make it the cult, because like it wouldn't really be a rules-based order. It would just be part of Clarism, and following some incoherent set of rules that is based on your cult of personality. And that's what some people argue with, that Judaism as a whole or Islam as a whole is a cult, because it's an incoherent set of rules that is based on cultish personalities.
Well, I'm not starting a cult of personality. I have very few followers. Very few people actually understand what I'm trying to do, either because they deliberately pretend not to understand, or because they hate the idea so much that they just find it easier to misrepresent it. In what way is it incoherent, Dooovid? I think people understand it is Sharia for social conservative non-Muslims in the West who kind of need something to keep them socially conservative, i.e., respect the institutions of marriage and family. How is that incoherent?
Well, I mean, you have to see, like, if it was a system like Hasidic Judaism or something, well, obviously it's been surviving. There's, hundreds of thousands of people that have families, or Christianity. And we go back to this point of, so biblical people like Jews or Christians will fluctuate between, like, one day everyone will, follow these rules and will convince enough people, to an extreme belief system that, like, no, what I believe is that there's going to be a great war and almost all of humanity is going to be killed off. And just me and my cult and the people that follow the rules are going to survive. And so the extremist Jewish or Christianity fluctuates back between this, like, we're going to convince everybody and everyone's going to follow the system, to a more extreme belief that, God forbid, humanity will be destroyed and we're going to be the only ones who are going to be saved. And that's why an integral part of a cult is this us up against the world mentality.
Well, particular Koranism is intended to avoid this global conflagration. So if I regard myself, if I model myself on anyone at all, I suppose it would be Karl Marx and his big idea of communism, but I would be the Karl Marx of theocrats.
Let me jump in here. Claire, did you have a chance to read that David Brooks essay, How America Got Mean? If you did, any thoughts on it?
Yes, I read as far as I could before the paywall came up, and I would suggest that the reason why people are getting so mean is because of atheism. Nihilism is a product of atheism, and nihilism means people who don't. Sorry, nihilism is a product of atheism, and atheism is a product of not having religious principles. And if you don't have religious principles, it means you don't have moral principles. And if you don't have moral principles, anything goes. So atheism basically means, if you think you can get away with murder, robbery, rape, etc., you'll do it. And once upon a time, it was a terrible thing to be accused of atheism, because this was what, in effect, your accuser was accusing you of, that you would do all these terrible things if you thought you could get away with it. And now virtually everyone is an atheist or a nihilist. And that's how we got so mean.
And so you think there is a definite trajectory in that we're becoming meaner in the West, and you also agree with David's other point that we're becoming lonelier?
Yes, because we can't bear another person's company. That's why pets are so popular. Because if pets could talk, they wouldn't be popular at all, because they would be criticizing their masters and mistresses. But because they can't talk, they are given a free pass, I suppose. And pet owners are prepared to be the toilet attendants of their dogs, picking up their poop in the park, while everyone looks on. But that's because people need attention. They want to be loved, but preferably by a mute, cuddly, furry, warm thing. But really, we need people to, tell us off.
Claire, do you have any thoughts on why so many young women are dressing up like anime characters? Do you have any idea why that is becoming a thing?
I think it must be a kind of infantilization, in the same way that I see the popularity of Hollywood movies featuring Marvel superheroes. It's a retreat into fantasy, I guess that they would be American gods. Some of you might be pleased to know that things are not much better in China. They're having, this demographic time bomb. The young no longer want to breed because of, the problems of atheism and nihilism and communism. Well, it's not really communism in China. It's really a form of capitalism that the Chinese prefer to masquerade as still being somehow socialism. So really, they are both, capitalism and communism are both different sides of the same materialist coin. And the materialistic ideologies do not take into account the spiritual needs of either communists or capitalists, and that is why there is this terrible void. And when we feel this terrible void, we seek power, and we can only feel power if we're mean to people. I mean, that's the whole point of being mean to people. You're asserting authority and hierarchy and status over them by getting away with doing mean things. And that's how people get by these days.
And what's the basis for your self-esteem, Claire?
I suppose I have a sense of purpose. I do enjoy what I do. Probably because I feel I win all the arguments, even if nobody ever concedes that I've won the arguments. And when people lie about me and deliberately misunderstand my ideas, I think the system of rules I have is actually a lot of fun in that it allows you to make to win all these arguments. And I will mention Curious Gazelle again. She is a bit of a troll herself, and she likes using secular Koranism to upset people, and this I find quite heartening.
Just you say that it's funny. You delude yourself into thinking people like you when they don't, and maybe I'm the opposite. I delude myself into thinking people don't really like me. When few occasions maybe people do actually like me.
Well, people half like and half not like you, because you are this powerful personality. I certainly don't think lots of people like me. I think lots of people hate me. But when I do find people I get along with, that's very precious to me. But I know that I have more haters than supporters.
Claire, is self-esteem something that you think about? Is it something that you value? Is it something that you want to build?
I don't think I have self-esteem issues, because I think if I did, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, because it is very wearing, and people, do try to say the meanest things to, in the hope of upsetting you and shutting you up. And I think I most probably don't have self-esteem issues to continue what I'm doing. I think the chief reason I managed to keep myself going, I suppose, is because I try to anticipate what the meanest people will say. And if I already anticipated that, a mean person would say these things, it becomes less hurtful. It's only a shock when, you never thought about it and somebody said it to upset you.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, Claire, with 10 being the meanest, how mean would you rate yourself?
It depends on who I'm being mean to. I think I am known for being mean to, well, people I think who are hypocritical, and that means Christians, and also I feel they really need to be exposed, because, well, okay, for reasons of strategy, Westerners need to believe that Christianity is kaput in order to be more receptive to secular Koranism. So one part of it is strategic, and the other part is that it's not good for them if God actually exists. Because if Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy, as I say, then God would be plenty mad with them, and he's been quite patient with them so far. But obviously they're under a curse because things are getting worse, and there doesn't seem to be any escape from them. But I'm not saying that Christians are the only people to be cursed. It was actually a Salafist Muslim who said Muslims are cursed because we were so wonderful and powerful, and look at us now, always whinging about Western imperialism. And as for Jews, they've been cursed a long time, and there's actually a very long list of curses in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. So I think Jews have been cursed too, and the curse will take the form of World War III, and even if it doesn't happen, there will be terrible economic dislocation when the dollar loses its world currency status, which is imminent.
Dooovid, on a scale of 1 to 10, how mean would you understand yourself?
Well, I try very hard not to be mean. I would say when I was younger, pretty mean, like 9. Now I'd probably like 2 or 3. Like I could still have natural tendency to be mean, or even just thinking Claire, like because she doesn't use the violent terminology. But yeah, if I hadn't found Judaism and broke myself, I might have been dangerous and violent. And now I think I'm generally a pretty good guy. Sometimes my heart still tells me to do bad things, but I almost never follow through. And generally, I'll help people or be nice, and because I train myself that way.
Claire, do you think that you're less mean than 5 or 10 years ago, or the same level of mean?
I don't know. I'm just mean to certain people, and I suppose if words were weapons, sometimes I get to a kind of rage level of 9.9, So it's hard to say, and obviously for certain people, I want to be kind to them because they don't understand, or they could be potentially helpful. So when I think about what I say to Christians, yes, I am trying to undermine the whole basis of their belief system, because they need to know, because it's actually dangerous to continue thinking that Christianity is still working. In my mind, it's equivalent of watching somebody jump out of a plane with carrying a parachute won't open. So I guess
Can you give an
warnings.
example of going to a 9.9 out of 10 in rage? Can you think of an example where that's happened to you?
When I'm rude about the Trinity, I suppose, and I imagine that these Christians would be so. Okay, I mean, what I'm saying to Christians is basically you believe in lies for nearly 1700 years. Sorry, but it was just made up, and you've got to give it up instead of doubling down and using your hatred against Jews and Muslims as some sort of justification for your continuing professed belief in Christianity.
I wouldn't put Claire past like an 8, maybe a 9, and like she even occasionally messaged me on Facebook just to like bash me. It was like, why don't you just admit you're an idol worshiper? Every single thing about you is a failure. So like you just like randomly, I'll get like messages from Claire telling me how horrible I am. But like even that, like I don't think Claire gets past like a 9, and even like because you have to have some, what does it mean if you're 9.9? God forbid, like YouTube terms of services, like encouraging
yes,
or something. But if you're just gonna say like you're a complete failure, or you're a hypocrite, everything about you is a lie. I mean, Claire could be pretty regular, and then like I'll wake up in the morning and see like a message on Facebook from Claire, and it's like, why don't you admit that you're a complete fraud and a lie?
Yes,
Claire,
a lot.
what's
The
going
last
on there?
session was. The last session was quite recent. I'll admit that, Dooovid. You were talking to Jim Bowden, and he was kind of appealing to you, Dooovid, to agree with him, and you were accusing him of being degenerate, and really it was so pathetic. He was saying, isn't this terrible? And why can't you do something about it? And he was kind of appealing to you as a sort of higher status Jew, and him not really knowing what to do, and you called him a degenerate, and yes, this wasn't private, it was public on Twitter, under your tweet of your latest week in review.
I mean, that was, he kept on wanting me to complain about like the trans or LGBT stuff. And
he wanted you to agree
I called
with him
a degenerate because I mean, even though he's complaining about it, called like the Fox News degeneracy, because like he's the one bringing it up. And it's like, even though he's bringing it up to complain about it, he's still bringing it up. But if you put like, okay, like you're so pathetic, that might be like 7 to 8. Like you're a degenerate, maybe like 8 level, versus like you're a complete failure, you're a fraud, everything about you's a lie. That's like a 9 level. And like 10 level is like inducement to like, God forbid, like, like self-harm, suicide, something like that. And so Claire
I would never say
generally
that.
fluctuates between like 7 and 9, like like that's pathetic, to like this level, like just like you're a lie, you're a fraud, everything about you's wrong.
Claire, why would you say something like everything about you is wrong?
I don't say that exactly. I say, why don't you just say what your religious beliefs or your professed religious beliefs require you to say? And I think the problem is that this Abrahamic God has a system that actually would solve all the problems if only people who claim to believe in their God would do it. It's like if Jews and Muslims actually said, oh, we have to follow the Quran or the Torah, then they wouldn't be putting up with any of it. They wouldn't. But they all keep quiet and they just pray a bit harder, and they think that is going to save them from all the mess that is in politics. Well, as for Christians, I mean, you can't even talk to them. It doesn't even compute what I'm trying to say. So, because I mean, Christians don't even
No, but you make it personal.
believe in marriage
You're not
now
just
because they have tranny shows in churches.
You're not just hypothetically critiquing Christianity or even like a person's affiliation. Like, you often make it personal to say, like, you, not to say like Judaism or your understanding. You say like, you are the liar, you are the fraud. And I mean, so now if you're backing down a little bit and just saying, well, you're part of a fraudulent system, you're part of what's wrong with society, that you will often take it to the personal level where but I mean, since Luke, you asked, where do you fall on the scale?
Oh, I would say probably 6 out of 10. That's my self-estimation.
You're more likely just to cut off at the point like this. I mean, Claire engages in negative relations for a long time. That could get her to like the high levels. That was where you're likely to just cut off a relationship before it would get to that point.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. Go ahead, Claire.
But I mean, so has that been successful for most of your life? I mean, were you a nasty kid when you didn't have that possibility and you would have reached like the 9-10 level, and that's why you chose the cutoff strategy? Or are there occasions where you can't cut off a person and then you do reach the 9 or 10 level?
I guess I'm embarrassed when I've hit the 9 or 10 level, and so because I've been online so much as a blogger since, let me think, 1997, so that's 26 years. So that's had a self-disciplinary effect, because it'd be a nightmare for that to go public, or when I lose control, it's just I look like such an idiot. So I think I've been disciplined by being somewhat in the public eye for some of those years and having to exercise due care. But Claire, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to say that if you're online, you have the hide of a rhinoceros anyway. So I think I mean the three of us we've said what exactly what we thought of each other, and we're still talking, and I think that's wonderful, because on the one, it's sort of kind of like being part of a family, because the family members say terrible things to each other, and they know they'll have to see each other again at the next wedding, funeral, whatever, and they will talk to each other again, and I think this is a great thing about online relationships, and I think it's also therapeutic. If people saying the worst thing about you, and you being able to take it, and I think it's actually helped my offline relationships, and in that I have been able to deal with my mother much better, because she wind me up something chronic, and since getting online, I've been able to tolerate her insults and her accusations so much better than before.
Dooovid, you got an excerpt from the David Brooks essay you wanted to read.
Yeah, and then maybe this part kind of sums up what we were talking about and why I would call like the failure of Jewish conservatism, or it's somewhat like a misnomer that you can't really be a Jewish Republican or conservative because it's predicated on this. But just towards the end of the essay, a couple of obvious things need to be said about the ethos of moral formation that dominated American life for so long. It prevailed alongside all sorts of hierarchies that we now rightly find abhorrent. Whites superior to blacks, men to women, Christians to Jews, straight people to gay people, and the emphasis on morality didn't produce perfect people. Moral formation doesn't succeed in making people angels. It tries to make them better than they otherwise might be. Furthermore, we would never want to go back to the training methods that prevailed for so long, rooted in so many thou shall nots and so much shaming, and riddled with so much racism and sexism. Yet a wise accounting should acknowledge that emphasizing moral formation meant focusing on an important question: what is life for? And teaching people how to bear up under inevitable difficulties. A culture invested in shaping character helped more people resilient by giving them ideas to cling to when times got hard. In some ways, the old approach to moral formation was at least theoretically egalitarian. If your status in the community was based on bad character and reputation, then a farmer could earn dignity as readily as a banker. The ethos came down hard on self-centeredness and narcissistic display. It offered practical guidance on how to be a good neighbor, a good friend. And then he goes on, then it mostly went away after World War II. And I would just call this proto-Noahidism, where it's just kind of like, well, Judaism was special, and then we spread the Judaism to the world through like Christianity, and it's kind of this Jewish Republican ideal of America, that it was the set of rules, not the founding stock, that made America special. And once we just spread that to all people, everything will be okay, which I think me and you both think is flawed. Although I think multiculturalism is inevitable, and this question of hierarchy here, where you can't Christians to Jews, blacks to whites, straight to say, I think me and you both agree hierarchy is necessary. So like diversity causes hierarchy, and like his somewhat, I don't even know, like idealistic, can't we all just get along? Conservatism.
Yeah, I mean, hierarchy is crucial, isn't it, in deciding, well, how to conduct ourselves?
Yeah.
I mean, God has to be above man, in order for man to obey God's laws. Well, in theory, anyway, you have to accept the theory first, that God, if he exists, would be above man.
And I'd say one last thing. The small town where my father's family comes from in Missouri, like a half a year ago, made national news because their school district, maybe has 10,000 people, reinstituted spanking in schools, and that was covered by a few national outlets. But like his kind of like make America great, like that this was progress. So Brooks is saying like we can't get rid of this progress, and people don't want to go back to that. And so I thought it was interesting that like the small town my father came from, Missouri, went back to spanking in schools.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it. But Brooks is a moderate conservative, isn't he? I've been reading his bio.
That's why I say, like, because he has a proto-Noahidism, and the misnomer is like like most Democrats, like it goes against it's kind of the Ronnie Goldman, like the elephant in the room, where like, no, man, all these mainstream conservative thinkers now are Jews, and the new Republican Party, where the leading Republican intellectuals are Jews, where historically, like, it was a contradiction in terms. You couldn't be a Jewish Republican, and by definition, in order to be a Republican as a Jew, the requirement was converting to Christianity. So now we're in this post-Christian Republican Party, and so you have Jews at the top trying to lead us forward in some sort of new system, and it seems to largely be failing. I don't know if Luke Ford has, you're kind of have been at the defense line of Jewish republicanism in the past, or maybe you've also pushed back the other way, saying like, well, it's a contradiction term. You really can't be a Jewish Republican, a Jewish conservative.
Well, I think as conservatism functions right now and the Republican Party functions right now, yeah, you can be a Jewish conservative and Jewish Republican. Maybe a different time and place, it'd be much more difficult. But Jews comprise much of the elite of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and very few Americans have problems that Jews are full citizens of the United States of America. I mean, this is not the Jewish question is not something most people think about.
That would just say that you can't. Being a Republican requires you to be white and Christian, and so they say Jews still in red areas, like Eric, I forget the Jewish man. Even most of the Jews in the Republican Party have formally converted to Christianity, in the sense. So in the blue areas where you have Republicans like Ben Shapiro, but still in most of red America, they don't want a Jewish leadership in the Republican Party, and the requirement is converting to Christianity. And I do think, that's like America first. Like if you strawman Nicholas Fuentes, and there might be some level where it's not, he does believe some of those things, but the certain level is just going back to olden days. Like the first thing is you have to convert to Christianity to be a Republican.
I'd say that'd be true of probably less than 10% of Republicans today, or maybe even less than 5%. I don't think that that Nick Fuentes perspective is widespread. I absolutely think that a Jew could gain the Republican nomination.
But I mean, even here in Michigan, so that no, it's not the case. Like Michigan, because most of territorial red state Michigan, I don't think that would be the case. Like a Jew would have to convert to Christianity in the majority of the Republican districts in Michigan. The only places where you could have a Jewish Republican would be in an urban center. But most, and it's probably the same for America. Most of America, that the majority of rural red America still would have this understanding that there's no such thing as a Jewish Republican.
Well, okay, Christians, if they even exist, don't take their religion seriously anymore. You were talking about these Jews who had to convert to Christianity to lead the Republican Party. There was a time when, Benjamin Disraeli had to convert to Anglicanism to become British Prime Minister. And now in Britain, there is a Hindu Prime Minister, and nobody even thought to make him convert.
Just look at Trump. Trump's main Jews all converted to Christianity. If it was the guy from CNBC, his Treasury advisor, but I'm saying all of the major Jews in Trump's cabinet were converts to Christianity. You could argue how serious their conversion was, but factually, even Trump, almost all the Jews he appointed to high senior positions converted to Christianity.
Claire, England, the United Kingdom right now has, I didn't know that Rishi Sunak was Hindu, but I knew his ancestry was Indian. Is there much turbulence about his Indian ancestry or his Hinduism?
Well, if there's been any complaints, it was sort of weak. I mean, obviously, I associate with circles who would complain about that sort of thing. But I mean, talking about Indians, there's Vivek Ramaswamy, who at least knows to call himself a Hindu monotheist. But he seems to be making waves in the Republican nomination.
Right. I absolutely believe that a Hindu could be president of the United States, that his Hinduism is not going to disqualify Vivek Ramaswamy. It'll hurt him with some voters, but overall, I don't think it'll be a big deal. I believe it's possible that a Jew could be prime minister of the United Kingdom. Would you agree with that, Claire?
I think so, because I mean the British no longer take Christianity seriously, because if they were taking it seriously, they would have insisted that Rishi Sunak converted to Anglicanism, but they didn't, because they don't believe in it anymore. I mean, you talk to any Anglican you meet, and they mock their own religion, within hours of talking to you. So that's how seriously they take their religion.
Well, maybe in the UK, but I mean, the statistics are, like America's extremely Christian, still like 70-80%. You could argue Bernie Sanders, although they didn't use the terminology, but why people preferred Biden over Sanders was his Christianity. And even the projections of the decline in Christianity, like you're looking at like Christianity being less than 50% belief, and it's still like projected like 20 years out. And the UK is already minority people who are serious about their Christianity. I think in the developed world, America is the most Christian of all the nations.
Yeah, but it's very shallow. It's very shallow Christianity. It's mainly a social club in America. And I'd say less
enough of an identity that it would preclude membership to Jews without conversion or Vivek. See, does Ramaswamy get over 15%, 20% in the polling? And although people might not say it, some people will say it, but just the numbers will demonstrate that they will not get behind him. And it's that. What does that membership mean? If it means that, it means they're going to exclude people who aren't Christian.
No, I don't believe it does. I mean, Donald Trump is obviously an atheist, and he still commands the overwhelming support of evangelical Christians.
He's not obviously an atheist. I mean, that's the argument that Jewish Republicans like you give. But no, I mean, Donald Trump is unquestionably a Christian, goes to church, talks about the Bible, has no qualms in calling himself a Christian. So you can say, well, that's not what's on his heart, but that you're just supplicating your thoughts about what's on his heart when from a factual level, he's a Christian.
Well, he claims to be a Christian, but there's a type of life that goes along with claiming to be a Christian that Donald Trump clearly does not demonstrate. He's very public
for Christianity, which is saying that no, I mean, most Americans, like Clinton, are going back. I mean, but now you as a Jew are pretending to be the gatekeeper for Christianity. But even if it is hypocritical and not true, to say whatever Trump's Christian identity means, 60-70% of Americans have some form of Christian identity, and it probably is pretty important to them, that level that at least he identifies as a Christian.
Well, Christians don't seem to have any problem in America of giving equal rights to non-Christians, and I don't think most of them would particularly be dismayed by the prospect of a non-Christian president. Claire, did you want to add anything here?
I think that's because they don't really believe in it themselves. So that's why they're so, free and easy with giving equal status to other people. But if they did, if you were Catholic and you had this extra long mass that you attended and you were driven by Catholic guilt, you wouldn't like it if the Pope said, oh, everybody has a reasonable chance of getting to heaven, because it means that, all your observance and all your Catholic guilt was wasted because anybody can just walk in to heaven. So it depends on how seriously you take it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about Judaism at the beginning, and the Israelite movements. And so I negate and say, like, well, you're not really Jewish. Like, Luke, like, no offense, like, you just think you're Jewish. Like, I don't really consider you Jewish. I don't consider most people Jewish. And okay, that's your identity. You still hold that as your identity. There's still a large group. And for Christians, that's still their identity, and there's going to be an in-group preference, and it's kind of the pushing, like Luke as the, kind of like you're edging in there as a Jew to destroy Christianity, where even if you're right on some technical level, that's why I say, like, well, 90% of the Jews in America aren't really Jews, like Claire would say, and Luke would push back and be like, no, they're still actually Jews, where Claire's like, no, you have to register and knock them off the registry of Jews. But I would say that Christianity is still the most single important identity of the majority of Americans, regardless of the truth of that identity. What most American, goyim look in the mirror and see a Christian. And I would say Donald Trump, even at that level, he probably looks in the mirror and sees a Christian.
Claire, we kind of gone around in circles there. I think we covered that topic. We each gave our perspective on what's going on. Let me ask you a different question. In his essay, David Brooks looks at America's past and sees it marred by racism and sexism. And he views racism and sexism as the antithesis of morality. Claire, in my perspective, a modest, moderate, judicious use of racism and sexism, which I understand to mean preferring your family to other families, preferring your people to other people, feeling most comfortable with your own group compared to strangers. And sexism, I mean in the sense that you understand that men and women have different gifts, that they have different things that they can bestow to their children or to society at large. I see that judicious, modest, and moderate use of what's called racism and sexism not only is not the antithesis of morality, but as the basis for morality, that you begin by connecting and bonding with your family, then your extended family, then your community, and then your people, your nation as a whole. And to me, that is the sane basis for morality. Any thoughts, Claire?
I would absolutely agree with you, because I think politics is really working out where our loyalties lie. And a lot of people get it wrong and they end up being hated. Hopefully your group has the right religion that will most protect you from your internal and external enemies. As for sexism, I would define sexism as things said or done that would offend feminists, and obviously feminists would be offended if you told them that perhaps the sexes are not quite equal and they instinctively think in different ways, because I would say buyers of sex and sellers of sex would think in a slightly different way to each other. And I see women as being providers of sex, which is what men want. And women often use sex to control men, and men have to think of ways around that to regulate their desire for women, such as inventing marriage and how and the rules of maintaining this practice, which has gone by the wayside after so many years of about half a century of feminism and sexual liberation, and that I think has really upset the balance and stopped people from even. Actually, I'm going to say it has led to a post-truth society, because the post-truth society is a society that doesn't really care about whether something is true or logical. Their sacred word is, "Oh, my lived experience," which is basically anecdotal evidence that you're not allowed to challenge for fear of challenging the person offering his or her anecdotal evidence. So I think the discourse has been totally corrupted. It is intellectually corrupt, and that is why you see these manifestations of dementia from our ruling classes, who are not doing what it is necessary even for them to survive.
And let me read this one-sentence summary of the David Brooks essay. In a culture devoid of moral education, generations are growing up in a morally inarticulate, self-referential world. And Claire, I don't think I can overstate the dramatic nature of switching from a self-referential world to the traditional alternative, which is a communal referential world. So in the traditional understanding of the self, we understood the self as part of a family, extended family, a tribe, a community, a faith community. We were part of a distinct people, and we understood ourselves in relation to something outside ourselves. The modern notion is that morality and meaning is something that we can just develop between our own ears, that it's something that we can develop entirely on our own. So switching from a self-referential world where morality and meaning is something that we decide for ourselves to an other referential or communal referential world would just be a dramatic sea change in our modern world. It would be, in essence, a repudiation of modernity and a return to a traditional, even medieval perspective on life. Any thoughts, Claire?
I think we should certainly go back to a rules-based system, because that's the only way for us to solve our problems. Otherwise, we will be competing with each other to say, "Oh, I feel this offense more strongly than you felt," and there is no objective way of measuring it, and therefore we have to refer to some kind of objective morality, and that would be the law. And the law would have to be based on a moral system, and well, we have to choose our moral system. And I'm saying for Americans, it can't be Christianity, because that would be actually un-American, because of the trouble the founding fathers took in separating the church from the state. And part of my thesis on secular Koranism is that the founding fathers were proto-Muslim. They might not have expressed Muslim ideas consciously or proudly, but really Jefferson owned the Quran. He bought it in 1765 when he was 22 years old. He certainly used it to negotiate with the Barbary pirates, and I think Americans should at least recognize that there was no religious freedom when Jews took their religion seriously, because blasphemy and idolatry were capital offenses, and of course Christians were not exactly backward in burning heretics at the stake when they took their religion seriously. It is only the Quran that even mentions this, this idea of allowing people religious freedom, even though they're wrong.
Now, I want to develop on something that Dooovid wrote in the chat. He says that when Luke looks in the mirror, he sees a Jew. And when Donald Trump looks in the mirror, he sees a Christian. And I would contend, in consonance with the worldview I just articulated, that whether or not you see yourself in the mirror as a Jew or a Christian matters much less than whether the community around you, the people around you, the people most important to you, see you in a certain light. If you think you're Jewish, but no one important in your life sees you as Jewish, you're going to have a virtually impossible time maintaining the illusion that you're Jewish, that we get cues about who we are, what matters, what's important, what's right and wrong from the people around us, from our family, extended family, community, from our people. And so that's why I believe that we should not primarily seek to be self-referential. We should seek to be communally referential. Any thoughts, Claire?
This brings me to who our associates are. So for most people online, people will think of Doovid as Jewish, and they acknowledge his Jewishness. Well, perhaps, Jews in real life might not acknowledge his Jewishness so much. But I mean, online, Doovid is the alt-right rabbi. He's been described in those terms, and for you, because you spend so much of your life online, you're acknowledged to be Jewish. For me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Muslims sort of kind of want me to be Muslim, and there are people who assume I'm Muslim, but I'm not. But I'm conscious of the imperative that I maintain my agnostic identity in order to be more effective in propagating secular Koranism.
Okay, yeah, Dooovid, you wanted to make some comments.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to close it off unless you want to say something right after it. But I don't think I talked with you about it, but I know you covered the Riverfront Brawl, and I was on a panel last week talking, like defense politics Asia, with people from all over the world, from Africa, and we're talking about what was the revolution in Niger, and saying the Riverfront Brawl was significant in American history because all the whites got arrested, none of the blacks got arrested. And like I watch sometimes Democracy Now! Or the liberal media, and that was like progress. Look at how America has progressed. Something happened, and end of the day, all the whites involved got arrested, none of the blacks involved got arrested. And I was thinking Oliver Anthony. My impression was like like the Nick Fuentes critique, and I saw something in Countercurrents. It's kind of like an apologetics, that he's apologizing for white America, like it's over, it's the new world. I hate that this is the new world, but it is, and it's diversity, and things suck, but like it is what it is. Don't fight back. And he's like the repentant Travis McMichael, saying that Oliver Anthony looks like Travis McMichael, who fought back, and now he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, as opposed to Oliver Anthony, who has accepted the new world because he can't win. And from the Brooks article, that's like the hope of the rules-based order. You have like the African Americans are going to buy in because they're in charge now. And it used to be if there was a problem, all the blacks would be arrested, even if they're not at fault, and all the whites would get away. But now all the blacks got away and all the whites got arrested, and it's not based on like a rules order. And rules order is somewhat like a misnomer, because rules tend to favor one group over the other. That whether theoretically there could be like objective rules that if we all just followed those, it'd be good for everybody, is unlikely, because rules favor one group over the other. And that's why I said like the cultural wars are zero sum. It's going to hurt some people and benefit others. There's going to be winners and losers. And, God forbid, that's why I think I was actually arguing this defense politics Asia, that I think America could fall apart any day now, like Trump being arrested, like the balkanization we've talked about in the past, that there's multiple scenarios that I could see America falling apart any day now, mostly related to Trump's indictment, but that people are ready for it. And I'm skeptical. Like, I believe in God, fear God, just trying my best, but I don't see any path forward really for some sort of collective system, rules-based order that's going to encompass everything. But I'm still following it, still trying my best.
Okay, great. And thanks, Dooovid. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
Carry on with Claire. Claire, in this essay, David Brooks tries to make the case for moral education. How effective do you think moral education is compared to the moral education that comes naturally when you're bonded to other people, such as your family, extended family, and community?
Well, people only relied on the family before the welfare state, because now they know that if they don't like it, they can move out, and the council will provide them with accommodation if they're a single mother. That has rather broken up the family, and it's affected by economics, obviously, and I think Jewish emancipation has created this tendency to assimilate, because Jews have the option of assimilating when previously Gentiles would be very hostile towards them. So, but on the question of moral education, what does that actually mean? I think it can only mean the awareness of what your religious principles are. And you can only know what they are when you choose your religion. And so far, America is a country without an official religion. And I think that has been the source of its problems for, quite a long time.
So you see religion as the only sustainable basis for morality?
Well, yes, because if you don't have a religion, you keep having this culture, these culture wars, and these are very divisive and destructive. You'll have the conservatives and liberals, and they'll keep disagreeing. I'm not saying that once you have a theocracy, everything, there will be no disagreements. Or people will find ways to disagree with each other about the interpretation of certain verses, or whatever. There'll still be legal matters that people will disagree on. But I think if you actually choose a moral system, you will have less scope for these divisive and destructive culture wars.
Okay, Claire, I'm going to start to wrap up the stream today. Do you have any final words?
I wanted to ask you a question about Andrew Tate. Do you have any views about him?
I find him repulsive.
But do you not think he's more of a politician than little Nick Fuentes? Because he's appeared on Tucker Carlson and had a 2.5-hour interview, and Tucker clearly respects and likes him.
I just am so repulsed by him that I haven't gone beyond that very surface level reaction. So there are people who think about him more deeply than I do. I just don't find enough incentive to try to think about him more deeply beyond just my level of repulsion. But I'm sure there are hidden depths to Andrew Tate. I'm sure there are good things about him in addition to the repulsive things. What do you think about Andrew Tate?
I think he seems to be consciously or unconsciously, he's got the support of quite a few Muslim tweeters, and I guess he's going to get a bit more support than Nick Fuentes. Does Nick Fuentes still identify as Catholic?
Yeah, I believe so. But I mean, to me, it's just a transparent pose. It's just much more socially acceptable to say, look, I'm a trad Catholic, but there's absolutely nothing about Nick Fuentes that seems to indicate any level of sacrifice for his religion. It just seems to be a convenient pose.
Yeah, a flag of convenience.
Yes.
And I thought his Tate's brother, he's an Orthodox Christian, I suppose, to marry some Orthodox Christian in Romania. So it seems to me that the Tate brothers have kind of got, social conservatism in the bag, just because, each brother is one of each. If they want to, gather in social conservatism, they seem to have done it. I mean, does he have a long-term political strategy? I don't know. Did you listen to all 2.5 hours of his interview?
Oh God, no! I just find him so repulsive, so crude, so moronic that I can't spend any time listening to him. But how about you? What's your reaction to Andrew Tate?
I actually listened to it twice, and I'm really impressed at how well he deals with difficult questions. I suppose you didn't listen to him being interrogated by Piers Morgan, but I thought he
No.
stood up very well. So I mean, he's not stupid. That is the thing, and he's well. I suppose I admire him because I can imagine myself saying the things that he says. I mean, if I were minded to make a case for Islam, and he's been doing that, and I think he's got quite a few Muslim supporters. Called Ahmed. Sorry, Sulaiman Ahmed, who seems to be a bit of a polymath in that he's a lawyer, he's a psychologist, I think, and also a mathematician who tweets in support of him. What about Samira Khan? Have you heard of her?
No.
She's quite active on Twitter. Well, she does this Muslim MAGA thing. I mean, she was quite funny in that she was saying, I advise Americans to, Californians to leave America, and I advise Americans to leave America, and then she said she might go to Russia to hunt for a husband. She's 32.
I don't take any Muslim I'm confessing here. I'm not saying that what I'm about to say is intellectually strong. I'm not saying that my perspective is a good one. I'm not encouraging anyone else to take it, but I've said this to you before, and I'll just say it again. I can't think of any Islamic society that I would like America to become more like, or that I would admire. Therefore, because I don't see in practicality any application of Islam that I admire on a national or communal basis, therefore I just don't bother with Islamic intellectuals.
Fair enough. I'm just saying there doesn't appear to be any choice if it can't be Christianity, because Christians going to a different church, as I notice, a lot of these white nationalist types do. They go from Lutheran to Catholic, and it's not conservative enough, and then they go to Orthodox Christianity because it's the Christianity of Putin, because they admire him. Doesn't seem to be making political waves. But
how are you not repulsed by Andrew Tate? I just find him so crude and just repulsive. I'm just curious. You're a woman, so I would think that you'd have more delicate sensibilities. How do you get over the disgust factor?
Well, it's the same for Trump. I mean, a lot of people find Trump disgusting, and I'm the sort of, you have to work with what's available school of thought. We don't have this perfect candidate who everybody loves, but I mean, he's the one that I can think of, that anybody can think of, who's making some kind of pushback, and the fact that they want to jail him and throw the book at him and write books to throw at him suggests that he is a kind of Rouge II, maybe, because but Rouge and Tate started off as pickup artists, didn't they?
Yes.
And then because of their charisma, women liking them and whatever, they thought they could lead a movement, and I guess Rouge was shown that the government was going to allow it, and the government or the deep state or the CIA or whatever you want to call it has done the same to Tate by accusing him of all kinds of things and throwing the book at him. So there seems to be a pattern here. And I think they're targeting him because he seems sort of masculine enough to attract supporters and support Muslim, but particularly Muslim supporters who are maybe less of a pushover than Nick Fuentes' Catholic supporters.
And so with the Nick Fuentes, again, I find a worldview and an ideology that's just so shallow that for all his charm and his antics and his entertainment ability, it's just too low IQ for me to engage with deeply. What's your reaction to Nick Fuentes?
Yeah, I saw him, shyly saying the N word on Fresh and Fit, and of course it's just unthinkable that Tucker would give him the light of day. But back to Tucker again. When Tate was talking to him, he actually had this throwaway line like, "Oh, I would never kill myself," and he said it several times, I think at least 3 times in that 2.5 hour interview, suggesting that they might even kill him and make it look like suicide, and that's why he kept saying, "I would never commit suicide." And the latest Tucker interview with Trump had Trump saying words to that effect, that they might think of assassinating him, but he was still going to go through with it, and he's still fighting on even with this threat of death over him, and that, I think, can only galvanize support for men like that, in my view.
Now, I find Tucker amusing, and I find Tucker entertaining, but just so much of what he says I find to be just nonsensical, completely departing from reality. How do you react to Tucker Carlson?
I like Tucker just because he's so eloquent, and you can see that he's talking extempore. He's not reading from a speech. It all comes off the top of his head. So I think the reactions he get are genuine, and what he said about the Episcopalian Church, I mean, that was quite telling too. Who are these people? What do they believe in? He didn't know, but he was still gonna, stick with the Episcopalian Church, and I think that's a subject that needs to be returned to, about American history, about why the founding fathers had this revolution, rejecting Christianity in effect, because Christianity was a religion that supported the divine right of kings, and of course, the whole idea of the American Revolution was to reject the idea of kingship.
Well, Christianity is just so flexible that you can find effectively support for almost any politics within Christianity. Is that fair?
I think it's too flexible, and people have made up too much stuff about it. I mean, Mormonism is nothing to do with the Abrahamic God. I mean, it's a white American indigenous religion of America, and it promoted polygamy, and I suppose that was one of the reasons why they were persecuted right across America until they couldn't go any further when they got to Utah. But I mean, obviously, monogamous Christians were not going to allow these Mormons to be polygamous and outbreed them and outnumber them eventually. But I think the study of American forms of Christianity is interesting. I mean, and also the point is that it hasn't particularly protected Americans. Because, I mean, yes, Americans can have all these forms of Christianity, but it didn't really work for them. Seventh-day Adventism is an American creation, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Very much.
Yes. So maybe in the case of Christianity, diversity is not strength, and I think we can agree that the Catholic Church, when it was unrivaled, had the most power in the world. But eventually people. The monarchs of Europe eventually rebelled, because the whole point of the wars of the Reformation was because these formerly barbarian monarchs of Europe, after a few generations of studying Greek and Latin and whatever, had a few ideas of their own, and they didn't want to be told by the Pope in Rome what to do and how to run their kingdoms, and that was really what kickstarted the wars of the Reformation.
Allow me to just jump in here and be self-referential for a minute. Do you believe that I am an atheist, or do you believe that I believe in God?
I think you're on two minds. You would like. I think a lot of people are in two minds. the reason why I hold on to agnosticism is because we don't really know. And all I'm saying is we should act as if we believe, as a thought experiment, and maybe things will go better for us, because people will back down if they know you mean business. And if God exists, he just might protect you. But if you as somebody claiming to believe in God, in effect only act like an atheist, then probably you do not deserve divine protection. If your behavior is really no different to that of any atheist or nihilist who's really mean.
Well, I don't see any empirical difference in the moral quality of the behavior of atheists and the moral quality of the behavior of the ostensibly religious in the world around me. I mean, in California anyway, the lives that I see. Do you see a significant difference in the moral quality?
Well, I think a lot of people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, claim to believe in God because they at least acknowledge the power of religious groups, because religious groups are the most powerful and biggest groups available. I mean, in humanity. So they want to use the group protection that this provides, and they may inwardly be atheists. But they see it as living, becoming a clergyman, becoming a rabbi. They don't really believe, but it's fun to show their scholarship and win arguments, and maybe that's enough for them. But they're not going to go out of their way and say, "Hey, Christian, we think your religion is offensive to God as well as reason." But this is what I'm saying, because, well, I think somebody ought to say it. I mean, because I really do believe that that's a problem. You don't have a religion. That's why white people, of all people, have been, well, Christianity has not protected white people, is basically what I'm trying to say. It's been failing for 500 years, and they refuse to accept it because they hate Jews and they hate Muslims, and they can't think of any other way of existing. And they've also tried all kinds of secular political ideologies like liberalism and communism and fascism and Nazism, and they've tried all the wrong ways. So why not try the right way once you run out of options?
If I really were an atheist and I only propounded belief in God and religion for practical and pragmatic reasons, would you think less of me?
This has been what I've been saying about you to other people, and so that has been my thesis about you. So. But you're not the only one. I mean, I know lots of people who claim to believe in God, and they do all the religious things, but their behavior is no different to their voting behavior, their political speech beliefs are no different, because they submit to the current political orthodoxy, which is liberalism, I believe. I mean, it doesn't even have a name now because it's changed so many times.
Now,
is Black Lives Matter even liberalism? Who knows?
I'm looking at Twitter, and Curious Gazelle is tweeting a few days ago, "I defended you 3 times as a true believer, Luke." Was this with regard to belief in God? She's talking about participating in one of your Twitter spaces.
Yes, I was complaining about somebody, and I said this person didn't believe, and I meant you, and she came to your defense, saying, "Oh, but you are observant. You do all you observe the rights and whatever, the Sabbath and everything." And I said plenty of Muslims and Jews do that. They Christians go to church on Sundays, but it doesn't affect their political discourse. They're always ceding the argument to what they think is the prevailing political orthodoxy, and that suggests to me that they don't really believe, because if you really did believe, then you would assume that good will be rewarded, evil punished in this life or the next, and the next life business is really what I think people just can't go beyond. And I think, people's behavior move back to nihilism, because nihilism is basically saying, well, I'm number one, my needs are most important, and therefore I will do whatever is necessary for survival, and I have no principles, and I don't see how principles help me, because I don't believe in God or the afterlife. So that is the kind of mindset that people fall into, and you can tell if you see all these Christians who are liberals, and they conform to the prevailing political orthodoxy, like they've never heard of, the Ten Commandments or the Noahide laws or whatever it is that the Quran forbids.
Okay, any other topics that you want to hit before we wrap up for today?
I think you've covered all the subjects. I'm kind of out of ideas. Thank you so much for reminding me to mention my book. Thank you for all your questions that are so deep and so thought-provoking. And thank you for
thanks.
inviting me.
Thanks, Claire. Good to catch up with you. I'll talk to you another time. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of a video here on emotional sobriety.
Developing in us the ability to have an authentic love. And with an authentic love, it means that there's room for two people in a relationship, not just room for you and your rules and your ideas about how things have to be. But authentic love is big, it's roomy. It respects you and me. That's what it's based on. He talks about this being a transformation, because we have tapped into a consciousness, a way of being in the world that none of us knew about. We were all ignorant when we walked in these doors. And that's not to put us down. It's just a description of how we start this journey. Now, as we go through, as we did our inventory and stuff, we started to realize how emotionally dependent we were. And this chapter does a great job of Bill being able to discuss what that means and how it's damaged our relationship.
All right, this is psychologist Alan Berger talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
And we'll continue to do that unless we clean up these things. But he says that when you start to work with other people, a miracle starts to happen. He says to watch the eyes of men and women open with wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly filled with a new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled, to see the alcoholic's outcast received back into his community in full citizenship, and above all, to watch those people awaken to the presence of a new consciousness in their life. That's a gift that we get when we start working with others. And that's why service is such an important part of the recovery journey. Now, I want to talk to you about Viktor Frankl's observation, because Viktor Frankl was the author of Man's Search for Meaning. And this is what he said. And this is really at the basis of what Bill was capturing when he talked about working with others. Dr. Frankl says, true meaning of life is to be discovered in the world rather than within man or his own psyche. I'll say that again. The true meaning of life is to be discovered in the world rather than within man or his own psyche. He says, I have termed this constitutive characteristic the self-transcendence of human existence. We will call it the self-transcendence of the it's all about me syndrome. We go beyond that and we start to see others. He goes, but the effect of this is, the value of this, and it points to the fact that being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself. The more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or love another person, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself.
Right. If you're at work and you get lost in your tasks, if you get lost in being of service to your employer, like, you are happier, people around you are happier, time flies by more quickly, right? You optimize your work experience if you can transcend yourself and get lost in the cause of being of service.
One of my favorite authors is James Hillman, and he wrote a wonderful book that said, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world keeps getting worse. I'll say that title again. You don't have to read the book to get the essence of the book. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world keeps getting worse. Because what does psychotherapy do? It takes people into themselves. It takes people into looking at themselves. It focuses on self. Only recently have we seen a whole new revolution in psychotherapy being called relationally based psychotherapy, which is really paying attention to our connections with others. But up to this point, it's been all about us. And we go into therapy talking about ourselves, and we go into therapy looking at ourselves and focusing on ourselves. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy, and the world keeps getting worse. Well, here's the antidote, right? That Bill saw, right? Is helping other people, right? Now, the last part of that step is this, practicing these principles in all our affairs. And I started to pound this drum the last couple times that I've made comments on the other people's discussion. Is integration is at the heart of transformation. You can't have a transformation in your life unless you have integrated the experiences you've had. Integration creates transformation. Integration changes our consciousness. As we absorb more, as we as we learn more, as we develop more, our consciousness changes as a result of integration. We start to expand our consciousness. That's what this step is about. It's an expansion of our consciousness like never before. And we didn't have to go do ayahuasca or ketamine treatment to get there. We have to pay a price. We have to do some very hard work with the steps. Ayahuasca is easier. You just go show up for a weekend and do it. It's to work in the steps. It takes some effort. Join Herb's workshop. You'll understand very much what that means by the end of that year in terms of the amount of work it takes to really thoroughly work and practice these steps in our life. But that is what creates this transformation, is we're integrating these principles to the best of our ability, but with an understanding of that at this point in my life, I will be able, or let me say this, at a future date in my life, I will be able to integrate these things differently than I'm integrating them now. Bill said that very clearly, that more will be revealed. Rumi had this one poem that went, how is it with one rose that you can get a whole rose garden? Well, that's what the 12 steps do. One rose gives you a rose garden. It creates an incredible experience in our lives. The richness of it, the depth of it, the possibilities that it opens up in our life, we could have never imagined at the beginning of our journey when we walked in these doors, broken, bankrupt emotionally, spiritually. So it's a remarkable journey. Now, how does this relate to the emotional sobriety and self-esteem? Well, look, we're finally now paying attention to what Brandon called the pillar of self-esteem, and that is operating with our integrity. Practicing these principles in all our affairs means that we're living with integrity. We're paying attention to ourselves and our values and what's important to us, and we're not overriding them. And when we do, we realize that we pay a heavy price and we got to get back there and clean it up as quickly as we can. And if we don't, we relapse. That's what we know happens. That's what sends a lot of people back out. They start playing those games and compromising their integrity, and before they know it, they're back in the bottle, or they're back using their pills again, or whatever it is. Integrity.
Right. So if you're an addict, all right, losing your integrity in all likelihood means you're going to lose your sobriety. So if you steal money, start cheating people, you're usually on the path to losing sobriety, losing control of your life.
Is not optional anymore for us. It's very important in the program.
Right. When you're trying to recover, to lie is to die, to cheat is to die, to steal is to die.
And it's a pillar of our self-esteem. We can talk about it, go through all the other pillars. We've raised our consciousness, right? We've learned to be more appropriately assertive. We act for ourselves without impinging on the rights of others. We learn to act for ourselves without being selfish, and we learn to act for others without being selfless. We've created that balance that Declan was talking about earlier on in life. Now, none of these things were a part of our consciousness when we began this journey. We were in pain and we wanted it to stop. That's as far as that's all we could see. That's all that we could see on our horizon. Now our vista has opened up, incredibly so. And that's why I define recovery as the discovery of new possibilities. It's a shift in our consciousness.
That is huge. Recovery is the discovery of new possibilities. So it used to be in certain times of my life that if it was time to go to bed, I couldn't go to bed. There was no possibility. I had to whack off to pornography, all right? Or if I couldn't sleep, the only possibility really was to get up and what type of pornography would I consume, right? That's, not the entire trajectory of my life. That was, a few dark weeks here and a few dark weeks there. And for other people, they can't get to sleep unless they drink. For other people, they can't get relief from their misery unless they gamble. So I love this definition of recovery is the discovery of new possibilities. So one new possibility for me early on in my journey towards sexual sobriety was, instead of getting up to look at pornography, I can just get up and watch Seinfeld. I can just get up and watch some documentary about airplane crashes, right? I didn't have to look at pornography.
Is from that shift of a consciousness that says I'm okay if to a consciousness that says I'm okay even if.
It used to be I felt like I would die unless other people were paying attention to me, right? I had to either be the center of attention in a group or I just had no interest in participating. I would go to one of these two extremes. With recovery, I can start participating at an appropriate level with the group, with the community, with other people. And I don't have to be the center of attention to feel like I'm alive. It used to be I didn't feel like I was alive unless I was in an intense sexual relationship. So recovery meant that I could feel alive and feel good about myself even if I wasn't in an intense sexual relationship. It used to be I didn't feel like I was alive unless I was getting on TV regularly, unless I was having articles written about me regularly, unless I was getting 10,000 new readers a day regularly, right? That's what I needed to feel alive. Recovery meant that there are other ways of feeling alive outside of those possibilities. Used to be I didn't feel at ease in the world unless my stomach was filled with food, because the blood would rush to my stomach and that would reduce my anxiety levels.
That is the summary of what has happened to our consciousness. Now, that doesn't mean with every trial or tribulation in your life, you recover your balance immediately. Those of you who have known about my trials and tribulations in my life is I've been knocked down, and not down and out, but I've been knocked down for 3 or 4 months now. I'm starting to come back. It's taken a while to get my feet back under me. But, thanks to all of the love I've received and support from all of you and from my close friends, Roger has been there for me every day we talk, and he, gives me a shoulder to cry on and a perspective to hang on to. And Herb has done it, and Tom Rutledge has done that. And a few other close friends have done that. And I've appreciated it so much. We can do what I can't do. I couldn't have gotten through this without you, Raj. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, that will do it for me. Take